And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. It is Friday, July 22nd. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Adam Sharon. We are brought to you by Odds Shopper. It's going to be a big one. 13 games to break down. If you watched the strategy show earlier today, you're in luck. We're going to do it again, and it'll be even better. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Adam, how are you feeling about this slate now, 4 hours later?
Pretty similar. A couple things look a little bit differently for me. One being that I appear to be higher on Charlie Morton now than I was this morning. George Springer not in the lineup for Toronto. He was someone that was in my initial cash build, so obviously that changed some things. But still feel generally the same about the slate. Very, very obvious pitchers to get to. Very easy to get to them as well. And then a bunch of offenses that look the same.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm anxious to break it down now with at least half of the lineups or so that have come in since we started. So we've got at least a little bit more information than we had earlier today. 13 games is just going to be wild. It's a massive, massive slate. We got plenty of time to get through it. An hour and 10 minutes before it happens. 250 people in here already. Only 38 likes, though. So go ahead, hit that like button as I continue to just mumble while I try to pull up our ownership projections. Lovely Excel took a dump on me, metaphorically speaking, at the very least, prior to starting the show. I cannot save my file, so I have to just hope that nothing dies in the interim and hope I can copy and paste everything out of it at 6 o'clock. Should be just a real fun time once the show's over. And then I got to go cook dinner.
Are you playing?
Am I playing? Yes, I am playing. If I were not playing, I would not give a single shit what happened to this workbook. Unfortunately, I am playing, at which point this thing needs to work by 6:45 or I'm going to be running very different lineups than I normally do. Should be a treat. You ready to do this?
Yep.
Here we go. Game number 1, Orioles and Yankees. 3.9 run implied total for the O's, 4.8 for the Yanks. Tyler Wells and Jameson Taillon. We did not talk about Wells and Taillon with any sort of volume earlier today. They are pulling no ownership. I think there's a little bit of interest in Taillon, in my opinion, but nothing too crazy. The more likely scenario for me is that I am not using these pitchers.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I see it as well. Taillon's a decent pitcher, but with this being the first full slate back from the All-Star break, you're just going to get most teams running out their ace or at worst their number 2 pitcher. And so it's going to push those pitchers like Taillon that normally you get to a decent amount on, smaller slates, especially just kind of push them down the list because they are not as good from a fantasy standpoint as several other options tonight. So that's pretty much how it looks with Taillon. It's also really hot in Baltimore. So there's that. It's good hitting weather. Doesn't set up as a great spot for him anyway.
We're on the same page. So we're going to have to talk offenses here. And this is where it starts to get interesting. Yankees are second in our top stack tool, eighth in ownership. We talked a little bit about them earlier today in that they weren't pulling as much ownership relative to their top stack odds because they're pretty expensive. This is my number one stack, but very little separation between myself and the top stack tool. I would like to get to more of the Yankees. Judge at 16%, Stanton at 10%. The only two bats that aren't 2% owned for New York. This just feels like a good stack.
Yeah, perfectly happy to get to them. I think it looks like a good spot. In the crunch that I ran around 4 Eastern, so basically before all these lineups came out, I actually didn't get to a lot of the Yankees, and I think the reason is just what you said. They're expensive. I was getting to some cheaper stacks, but if that changes for me between now and lock, I certainly will not be upset about getting to more Yankees here. You have to pay for them. Judge is very expensive at 6,200. LeMahieu, Rizzo, Stanton, Donaldson, all relatively expensive before you get down to the bottom of the order that is pretty inexpensive. Tyler Wells is not a great pitcher at this point. He's not horrible so far this year. Not a lot of strikeouts, but a 168 expected ISO allowed to righties, 129 to lefties. So not like you're looking at a total gas can here. But again, the ball should carry well in Baltimore tonight also. So yeah, if you can get to them, then they obviously look very good. I agree that they're one of the top stacks in terms of top stack percentage. As is right now, though, I actually didn't get to a whole lot of them just because they are still getting some ownership, but more importantly, they're also really expensive.
I think I'm going to end up significantly over the field on like the LeMahieu, Rizzo, Donaldson guy, all these 2%ers. These are Gallo in the 9 hole. Like these are the guys that I think that I'm going to be pretty heavily over on. And I'll be close to neutral on Judge and Stanton. But I think in the aggregate, I'm just going to be over on the Yankees. That's one of the perks of not stacking is the fact that their prices aren't going to matter all that much. They're just going to look like good higher dollar hitters.
Yep.
On the opposite side, Orioles 15th in ownership, 20th in top stack, the exact same percentage, actually 2.4% for top stack, 2.4% for aggregate ownership. I like the Orioles a little bit more than that. I think they're going probably a little under owned, but at the same time, we're in basically a pitcher's park now. There's probably, 15 offenses that I like more than this. I can think they're fine, but that probably puts them behind quite a few teams.
I did get over the field by a pretty good amount on them in the crunch I ran earlier. I'm with you as far as they're just one of a bunch of teams that are just sitting in the middle of the pack here. Taillon has had some issues with left-handed power in particular this year, though. 224 actual ISO allowed, 196 expected ISO. Left-handed power in Baltimore is still going to play like it always has. You don't have, they didn't move the right field wall back 30 feet, just the left field wall. So that's pretty good. And then also just an interesting change in the Baltimore batting order. Adley Rutschman up to number 2 in the lineup now. So you do get another left-handed bat at the top of the order for the Orioles, also a catcher hitting second. That's always going to be appealing, especially, a guy that can hit like Rutschman. So now instead of the normal, Mullins hits 1, Santander hits 3, Rutschman hits 6, when you're talking about the lefties, all 3 of those guys are in the top 4 now. So it does just make them look a little bit better in that matchup against Taillon. Obviously, if you're stacking the Orioles, getting to any of Mancini, Mountcastle, Hayes is fine. Odor is really cheap. But I think the priorities from this team are Mullins, Rutschman, Santander.
Okay. I don't disagree with you there. That's exactly how everything's looking on my end. DFIC wants to know how much I hate you for talking me into the no stack test. Not at all, because it's not like a major financial outlay to do it. I'm just sick of doing it. There's the difference. I just want to be able to talk to you and talk about stacks. It's removed a piece of the show for me that I can't actually talk about. And that's where it gets tricky, because I'm just going to play the best hitters sort of as much as possible, unless they're aggressively over-owned. So it doesn't really help me out there. Anything else, Orioles or Yankees?
Nope.
All righty. Phillies and Cubs. 4.8 run implied total for the Phillies, 4.3 for the Cubs. Kyle Gibson, Justin Steele. No one rostering Steele, but Kyle Gibson, 7.5% owned. That is essentially the most of any potential pay down option, and that is not exactly a high number. Are you expecting to be paying down? Do you know where your floor is for pitcher yet? Do you like Gibson? All these questions to you.
Mostly, At least in the crunch I ran earlier, I'm not getting much of any pitcher that isn't one of those main four. I'm perfectly fine if that holds. I got like 3% Gibson, which is as much of anyone that isn't named Burns, Morton, Scherzer, or Otani. So he's just somebody where, if you land in that mid range, whatever, he's 6,800. He's probably a little bit underpriced, but I really just don't know what those savings are going to get you on this particular slate. And the gap in terms of DFS potential, in terms of strikeout stuff between him and these top tier guys is pretty massive. Also, hot weather in Philadelphia. So again, a game where, if this were April, maybe the Phillies, 4.8 implied run total would be like 4.2, and the Cubs 4.2 would be like 3.6. But pretty elevated implied run totals here, or game total in general, because of the weather too.
Good news. I don't know if you care at all, but good news for me. I was just able to save this file as a different document type. So I will ultimately be able to take everything that I need, copy it over, and be good to go. I know how much everybody cared, so I wanted to make sure I told everyone. Justin Steele, I don't get the sense we're talking about him.
No, he's just another one. I mean, throw him in that bucket with Gibson, with Taillon, where different slate, maybe some interest. He has been a pretty solid pitcher overall this year. He's done a very, very good job of limiting power. Only a 103 expected ISO to righties, well below 100 to lefties. But I just don't think I really need a point per dollar pitcher with limited strikeout upside as opposed to one of the best pitchers in baseball. And there's a lot of those on this slate.
Makes sense to me. Let's talk Phillies bats because they're the ones that are pulling a little bit more ownership, although we do have the Cubs slightly higher in the top stack tool. This is a matchup between my number 2 and number 3 stacks, which I was not expecting. This is 7 and 5 in the top stack tool. The big key here is that like everybody's the same from a top stack perspective today. There is such little separation. It's kind of crazy. So Phillies are 7th in top stack, 7th in ownership. We've got Nick Castellanos above 10%, only guy in the Phillies lineup that is. I probably have a little bit more interest in the Phillies than we as a site will. Where are you landing on Philadelphia?
So I didn't get to much Philly or Chicago in the crunch I ran earlier. But again, it's just all these teams are so close together. I don't read too much into that. If it's a team you want to get to, there's no reason that I'm not getting to them. Like no specific reason. They are, getting a little bit more ownership than some other teams, but it's nothing crazy. Good hitting conditions, good park, reasonable team total. Wouldn't be shocked if I get more Philadelphia in my final crunch with lineups than I did before. Wouldn't be shocked if I don't. But the point is, there's just a bunch of teams on this slate that look about the same. So if you're building lineups and you're like, I like Philly, I don't have anything to say to you as a reason you shouldn't like Philly or you shouldn't play them. I already mentioned Justin Steele being very good at limiting power, but that, only goes so far. So they look fine. I personally didn't really get to them, at least earlier.
All right. I'm a little surprised. And do you have any concept of why you're not getting to the Cubs? Because at least based on the top stack tool, they are showing up pretty significantly under-owned.
I don't have the wait. Oh, I trying to find. I didn't know if I had them under-owned, and then I just hit everything that I was supposed to be.
Fair.
I didn't really have them that under-owned. Like I looked slightly under-owned.
Okay. Yeah, I just saw their aggregate ownership. That looked pretty good for at least from a rank perspective, 5th to 12th. I'm guessing I get more Phillies just because I think the lineup in general is a little bit better. Like I had them at 6% top stack, where we have them at 5. Not a huge gap, but I'm a little bit more interested in the Philadelphia side. Probably a little bit. Well, maybe not even. There's a lot of power on both sides of this game for a park with that profiles positively for power.
Yeah, there is.
Interesting. Weird game. Like Gibson's good enough. Steele's good enough. Both offenses are like a little bit above average. It's a tricky game.
Yeah, it's a really weird game because neither pitcher does a really good job missing bats. Justin Steele has really good strikeout stuff against lefties, but he's facing a predominantly right-handed lineup. Gibson doesn't strike guys out, but neither guy gives up a whole lot of power either. Both lineups have power. The conditions favor hitters, so it is a really interesting game. I think there's a very high ceiling for both of these teams. And they're both, the Cubs are in that same bucket as the Phillies for me, where I didn't get to them, but it doesn't have a whole lot to do with them. It's just that, other teams popped up a little bit more for me.
That makes sense. All right, let's. Any individual bats you want to highlight on either side here? Guys that you think just might pop a little bit more for you than in other places. Like obviously Patrick Wisdom is a strikeout machine, has some power, 4K, no ownership. You're trying to buy a single home run, not the craziest thing, but
Yeah, I mean, I think Suzuki's going a little underowned. I think Castellanos looks good from the Philly side.
I'm with you. All right, let's go Pirates and Marlins. 3.9 run implied total for Pittsburgh. 4.3 for the Marlins. Zach Thompson now going for Pittsburgh. Braxton Garrett going for the Marlins. I don't think either of those two things matter all that much because neither pitcher is getting any ownership. Do you want to go to Zach Thompson at 6,600 or Braxton Garrett at 7,400?
No, I don't. Garrett, a different slate, maybe. Decent park to pitch in, not as hot as other places. Pirates aren't any good. Garrett is fine, but just totally unnecessary on this slate.
Yes, it is. How necessary are the Marlins? And I already know the answer to this question for you, but I'm asking it anyway. 3rd in ownership, 5th in top stack. I agree with that, Mark, as well. So talk to me about Miami.
I got a lot of them in that crunch I ran earlier, just very, very clearly my highest owned team. I think it's just the value standpoint. They're all cheap throughout the lineup. There is still some power in this lineup too. Garrett Cooper at 2,300 batting second is going to look pretty good. Garcia has power. Soler has power, although hitting 7th isn't ideal, but still has power. Jesus Sanchez has power. So, again, maybe that comes down a little bit, but they were far and away my highest owned team earlier. And I think the reason is just that it allows me to run secondary stacks with whatever hitters I want. It allows me to get to the good pitching. It just allows me to build very strong lineups overall.
How much did you bump up Miami because, or how much did you knock down the Pirates because Garrett struck out 11 of these Pirates?
I completely X'd them out.
Perfect. Just wanted to know. I'm really surprised you're getting to Miami. It's got to be a value thing, right? Like that's just driving everything because of your pitching. You just don't. You've got so much Scherzer, Burns, Ohtani, Morton, whatever combo of those guys that you're getting to, that finding the value of Miami is the first way you're getting there. Because these guys are free. It's rare that you see the number 9 hitter in a lineup be the most expensive hitter in a lineup, but that's where we're at for Miami today.
Yeah, and it's just throughout the lineup, I have like all of those guys, at least right now. So it's for sure the value component that also, I don't even have their correct lineup in, so it could certainly change. That's worth noting also. But yeah, I mean, I have whatever their lineup was at like 3:30. Or their projected lineup was at 3:30. So I mean, that certainly could change. But it's just a cheap lineup, top to bottom, where when you look at the rest of the team, it's 2 of the stud pitchers. It's whatever I want to pay up for at any other position, I can do it. So I think it's not about the Marlins. It's that it's opening up so much other stuff.
Okay. Do you want anything of the 20th ranked Pirates stack?
No.
Yeah, same. $4,500 O'Neal Cruz, still probably underpriced.
Yeah, but I mean...
Oh, I don't mean it like it matters.
Okay.
Like, I'm not advocating for that at all. He just happened to have a green number next to his name, and none of it matters. They're not an offense that matters. Who's wrong?
The Arcathelza saying the only pay-up option in a good matchup is Burns. All the rest is suspect.
Yeah, that's absolute craziness. Anything else, Pirates or Marlins?
Nope.
There it is. So this one's easy, guys. Schedule for the rest of the day. You guys know the drill if you're watching the deeper dive. Live before lock coming up next, taking you all the way up till 7:05. And then free content for today. We will talk about it through the entire show, all the way up till 6. The other guys are going to talk about it too. You go straight to stokastic.com, browse to MLB Top Stacks tool. That is our free content for today. Mets and Padres. 4-run implied total for the Mets, 3 for the Padres. Max Scherzer, Yu Darvish. Max Scherzer, 33% owned at 10,400. Yu Darvish, 1% owned at 9,500. We will start with Scherzer. How much Scherzer do you want to get in this suspect matchup where he doesn't look all that great?
As much as I can. I mean, I think he's behind Burns and Morton, but got to 31% in the crunch earlier. If I end up a little higher or lower on that, it's fine. Sub 3 or right around 3 implied run total for the Padres. Still no Tatis. If you look at their lineup as an aggregate, it looks like they're an above average offense, but a lot of that's being driven by Manny Machado. If you can get through the Cronenworth Machado part of this order, there's not a whole lot for him to worry about. The biggest negative, I think, is that it is a predominantly left-handed lineup. But as I was saying this morning, when you talk about Scherzer, he's not as good against lefties as he is against righties, but he's still extremely, extremely good against lefties. 31.4% strikeout percentage against lefties this year, 36.1 against righties, 181 expected ISO to lefties, 105 to righties. So, again, gives up more power to lefties, but still striking out nearly a third of them. And the Padres don't have tons of left-handed power here. So more than happy to get to Scherzer.
It's so hard to talk about like inner circle Hall of Famers and point out their negative, but realize that their negative is still like elite.
Right.
Like, oh, he's not great. He's not great against lefties, but he's great against lefties and when you compare him to just being a knockout person against righties. It's so tough. What can we do with you, Darvish, here? Not a great strikeout matchup against the Mets. The Mets, just a generally speaking, good offense. Park helps a little bit here. We talked about it earlier today. Like, there's no ownership. I think it's reasonable to make some pivots to get to Darvish, but how much were you getting to when you ran your crunches?
Darvish? Like none.
Okay. I'm assuming you wouldn't mind having any. It's just not happening because of the way that today looks.
Yeah, I mean, he looks okay, but I don't even have him. What pitchers do I have him behind? In terms of projection, he's not on the same planet as Burns, Scherzer, Ohtani, Morton. He's behind Giolito for me. He's behind Gallen and Gossman. He's in there with Tyler Anderson. It's just you're not getting much of a price discount. You're not getting a good matchup. He's not on the same level in terms of strikeouts so far this year. 23% strikeout percentage. I just don't really have any reason to get to him.
When you say he's behind Gallen, do you mean relative to salary or raw?
I have him projected for less points than Gallen.
Whew. Okay. I should have pasted more of my projections into our DM. I've got a bunch. I've got Darvish by 3.
Yeah, I mean, they've been pretty much the same pitcher this year, but one's facing the Mets and one is facing the Nats.
Fair. Yeah, clearly I like the $7,600 Zach Gallen price tag quite a bit more than $9,500 on Darvish, but that felt like a pretty big gap. None of it matters. I'm with you in that I don't think that I'm going to get to too much Darvish, but I also think that 1% is wrong. We're going to have one or two of these guys in every show that we do at this point. Can we get
just to clarify, because Arkadelza keeps talking about it, you do not need 35 points from Max Scherzer.
No, not even close.
That's just not how baseball works.
No. I'd be really happy to get it. But yeah, that's not going to be the problem. If Max Scherzer goes for 26, that's not the reason you didn't win anything.
Right. Yeah, it's not basketball. You don't need every guy to hit some value threshold.
Right. We can't, there's no stacking here, right? We can't go to the Mets or Padres.
I don't see much reason to get to either one.
I have the Mets as the 22nd stack and the Padres as 24th. That is out of 26. So I don't see it. This is a pitching matchup more than anything.
Yeah, I mean,
and then we go to Red Sox.
In the crunch I read earlier, I guess technically I'm slightly overweight on the bets, but it's 2.5% to 2%.
2 years ago, well, I don't know, maybe not even. We could still get a couple messages now where you win a slate on a Mets stack and you have 2% to 1% and say that you weren't on them and they're your 11th most exposed team.
Right.
Red Sox and Blue Jays. 4.4 run implied total for the Sox, 4.7 for the Jays. Nathan Eovaldi and Kevin Gossman. No ownership going to really either of these guys. To me, Gossman just looks like another version of Yu Darvish today.
Yeah, pretty much same boat. Not a great matchup against Boston. On a lot of slates, if you give me Gossman at 9,100 and tell me he's facing the Red Sox, I will suck it up and put him in the lineups. But on this one, it's just that I don't really have a lot of reason to make that sacrifice because with 26 offenses going, it's not difficult to find low enough owned bats. So I'm not really put in a position where I have to look to pivot away from what I consider the best pitching. And there's a pretty big gap in projection for me between Gossman and 4 other guys on the slate. So yeah, it's just difficult for me to get there. I think he's a good pitcher. The spot is okay. I mean, as a whole, the Red Sox are good offensively, but they are pretty. That's kind of skewed by the fact that like Devers, Martinez, and Bogarts are really, really good. When you get towards the bottom of this order and you have Plawecki, Bradley, Jeter, Downs, I don't think you should be too concerned about those guys. But it's still just I don't have a good reason to be playing Gossman when I can just play several other pitchers.
Sounds like you should play Blue Jays bats. Sean V thinks Eovaldi gives up 5 dongs in the first 3 innings. I hope you're betting that. That's a lot of money. If that's what you think is about to happen. I'll take the under, but that would be fairly lucrative to make that sort of bet. So try to hunt that out. Let's talk bats. Speaking of that Blue Jays team that's going to be giving up 5 dongs in 3 innings, I don't get the sense that he gets the opportunity to give up that 5th dong if he's already given up 4 in the first 3 innings. But, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. 3rd in top stack for Toronto, 4th in ownership. They're Toronto. They just look good.
Yeah, they look good. When I ran my crunch earlier, we hadn't gotten their lineup yet, so we had Springer in. I still got well more than the field on them. Evaldi's a good pitcher, but he's someone that I've kind of said it in the opposite way so far, where we've talked about some pitchers that are solid mid-range pitchers that you kind of just don't need to get to on this slate. The way I see it for Toronto is that they actually look a little bit better than they normally would, given how many good pitchers are on this slate, because Evaldi has had power issues this year. He's allowed 2.1 home runs per 9. His expected ISO to both sides of the plate is elevated, 221 to lefties, 195 to righties. On a lot of slates, it would be like, yeah, okay, he gives up some power, but there's 5 garbage can pitchers that I can get to. I don't need to single out Evaldi, but there's not really those pitchers on this slate. So it makes Toronto look, comparatively a little bit better. You lose George Springer, which certainly waters down the stack, but at the same time, you get a 2K leadoff hitter in Tapia. So that allows you to, get a little bit better one-offs around Toronto. It makes me want to get to them here. It's warm in Boston, just like it is in a lot of these other East Coast or all of these other East Coast games. So Toronto still looks good to me.
Yeah, you and me both. Tapia cash.
Viable. He's not in my lineup at the moment, but it was just basically a 1v1 where I had to decide between Tapia and somebody else.
Yeah. 2K leadoff hitters, just generally speaking, are going to have at least a little bit of love, particularly when the guys hitting after you are Vlad and Kirk. If you get on, there's a decent chance you're getting knocked around. And especially if that happens in the first 3 innings. For the Red Sox, 11th in top stack, 6th in ownership, with the caveat that most of that 6th is Rafael Devers. What are you doing with Boston?
I was getting to a good amount of them as well. I don't love it. It's not something I can explain in terms of oh, this is why Kevin Gossman's going to struggle. I think it's more so just that Devers is one of the top third base options, so that pushes him up a bit. And then, the top and middle of this order does still have plenty of power. I got to 14% Bogarts, 15% Duran, 16% Devers, 14% Downs, 14% Verdugo in the crunch I ran earlier, 7% JD. So yeah, it's another spot where if that changes, I wouldn't be surprised if that comes down a bit. But when a bunch of these teams look the same, I do like the upside that you get from the Red Sox.
Devers cash option, that's for sure. Do you have him?
Cash option for sure. Yeah, I think it's between him and Ramirez.
Okay, cool. Let's see here.
I crunched 100 lineups without any settings or anything. Ramirez was in 57 of them. Devers was in 32.
That'll do it.
Yeah, tells me it's going to be one of those guys, most likely.
Which you could probably pencil in on a day-to-day basis, so long as they play.
Right. Yeah. The only other thing I see is if you pay down, maybe you go to Joey Wendell leading off, but okay. I don't think you're paying down
there. Anything else we're missing here on the Boston side or the Toronto side?
No.
Then we go to Oh, we're way early, so I'm gonna slowly take. Actually, we got a lot to talk about here. Braves and Angels, 3.9 run implied total for the Braves, 3.3 for the Angels. I need to start shutting down the extra 15 minutes for this show. The second time we do it, I'm gonna pull the plug on that. Charlie Morton going for Atlanta. Shohei Ohtani going for the Angels. Let's start with Morton. 49% owned right now, the highest owned pitcher on today's slate at 8,800. How do you feel about the ownership? How do you feel about Morton? Just open it all up now.
I'm fine with the ownership. I would prefer he not be 50% owned, but he's cheap at 8,800. He is tied for the fourth highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 27%. And the big thing is he's facing this Angels team. No Mike Trout. So many strikeouts in this lineup. You know, Ohtani, obviously a really, really good hitter. He also strikes out. Taylor Ward, a good hitter. Renjifo's your 3-hitter in this lineup. Jared Walsh strikes out a lot. He at least has some power. Joe Adell is basically a free strikeout. VR strikes out. Marsh strikes out. Stassi strikes out. This entire lineup just strikes out at just ridiculous rates across the board. So it just sets up as a very, very good strikeout spot for a pitcher who is fairly priced at 8,800 and who is one of the best strikeout pitchers on the slate. It's warm and appears to be humid in Atlanta, not quite as much as in the mid-Atlantic or the Northeast, but still not great pitching conditions, but it's a good price tag. It's a really, really high upside strikeout matchup as well.
When you see someone getting 50% ownership on a 13-game slate like this, does that change the way you approach the slate?
Kind of, but on a slate of this size, I don't think it matters too much because my hitters aren't going to be that popular. It's still going to, I think, force me where, if there's a tiebreaker between a team that's like 6-7% owned and a team that's like 2-3% owned, I'm probably going to be getting to that lower owned team a little bit more just because I am allowing so much ownership at pitcher. But on a slate of this size, it's not as big a deal. If this were like an 8-game slate with broken pricing in Coors Field, then it starts to be like really interesting because I'm not going to want to be jamming in, a bunch of Coors Field lineups plus Ohtani, plus right. Morton at 50% ownership. But with hitter ownership as low as it is on this slate, it makes it easier to kind of just not be too concerned about it.
Okay. Now let's go to the opposite side here. $200 more expensive than Morton. We have Shohei Ohtani. Obviously, you can't roster him as a hitter, but he is 30% owned. That's the fourth biggest number. He is one of the four pitchers that are getting 30 or more percent ownership on today's slate. Tougher matchup, obviously, for Ohtani. Worst strikeout matchup for Ohtani, but still, I think he should be in like 30% of lineups.
Yeah, he was the one that kind of fell off for me in the crunch earlier. I only got like 14 or 15%, but I wouldn't be mad if that comes up a bit. If some of my 60% Morton turns into Ohtani, that's fine. It is a tougher matchup, like you said. He is also underpriced. He has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at about 35%. He has a 2.43 xFIP, also the best on the slate. So it's still a really, really good play. It just kind of worked out for me where I was able to find low enough owned hitters that I could just play Morton, who I think projects a little bit better, but still think Ohtani's clearly one of the top 4 guys here.
Yeah, I don't. The relationship between these two guys is interesting. Like 50 to 30 feels like the wrong kind of gap, but I think they should be a little bit closer than that. At the same time, they are unquestionably 2 of the top 4 pitchers on today's slate. And just in case people are going to ask the question, you obviously have no problem playing Morton and Ohtani in the same lineup.
Nope, no issue playing them in the same lineup. Also, answer the question: do I have groups limiting ownership with just pitchers? No.
Okay. Are you expecting Morton Burns to be the preferred cash combination here?
Yes.
Okay. Do we want to touch on the most recent ownership? Yeah. Let's touch on this because I think it's important. Slate Breaker says, I got to fade Morton, a 50% Morton. I don't play enough lineups. I think you and I would be on the same page here that the amount of lineups you play doesn't really have anything to do with fading Morton.
Sort of. So Morton specifically, I don't really care. I do think if you're playing fewer lineups in large field tournaments, you should probably be more willing to make contrarian plays because you're otherwise going to be throwing like 5 lineups at, it to me, it makes more sense with stacks since there's more volatility there. But it does make sense to some extent with pitching too. But like, if you should probably just be more willing to take risks because, obviously it's really difficult to win large field tournaments anyway, but you're also putting yourself at a big disadvantage by playing a few lineups. So like for me, I'm going to be able to build a bunch of different iterations of Charlie Morton lineups. And so are all the other 150 maxers. If you're playing Charlie Morton, like you're just kind of going to be at an even bigger disadvantage if he goes off. The reason I say that it doesn't matter quite as much for Morton is because that is only one spot in your lineup, and pitching is also a bit more projectable. But in general, I do buy into the idea that if you're talking large field tournaments, if you're talking single entry, and you're playing the same number of lineups as everybody else, then back to doesn't matter at all. But if you're talking playing a few lineups where every pro is playing 150, you should be more willing, I think, to just completely go off the board.
Yeah, it didn't even cross my mind to be like putting 2 in the relay throw or something like that and calling it. Like I was just picturing it as I'm in a single entry or a 3 max.
Yeah. If you're playing the same number of lineups as everybody else, it doesn't matter at all.
Okay, then we're good. I'm glad we're on the same page here. I feel like that thought process was something that we would have said 4 years ago.
Well, and that's kind of what I related to is like 4-ish years ago. I mean, even when I like first started, I was playing, like 10 lineups in 150 max stuff. And I was very willing to like just concentrate on like a really tight core and try and be as contrarian as I could. It was a little bit different back then too, because projections just weren't readily available and they weren't as good. So like chalk wasn't as good either. But my thinking then, and I think it still applies in theory, is like, if I am going to play tournaments where I'm at an even bigger disadvantage because I'm not playing as many lineups, I think you should be more willing to take even bigger risks.
I'm of the opinion here for Slate Breaker. He said that's where I'm at, 10 lineups and 150 maxers. I would play different contests.
It all depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to have prolonged success at DFS, you should be playing lower buy-ins and maxing what you can within like the same amount of money. If you're just trying to have fun and entertainment and sweat baseball and hopefully get like a big win, then that's perfectly fine.
I don't love it. There's enough out there. There's enough good contests out there to not have to do that.
I mean, I have no interest. I would have no interest. I have no idea, what this person's like situation is, but like if I'm someone that just has like a solid 9-to-5 job, I make good money, like I want to gamble and try and make 50K in a night on baseball, like cool. Like you should still be trying to get better and like creating a way that increases your chances as much as you can to have success. But like I wouldn't just go say like, oh, I'm going to play this tournament where maybe I can win like $1,000, because like I wouldn't care. It wouldn't excite me. I wouldn't get any entertainment out of it.
Sure. It's an interesting balance. I hate the idea of entering the 150 max contest without having the full array. I just think you're going to grind yourself into dust by trying to do it.
But you also, I mean, if you run good out of the gate, you just got 50K. Like,
well, yeah,
it's all what your goals are. Like, if you're not trying to grind up a DFS bankroll over the next 5 years or something, like.
Well, there's a middle ground here. We don't have to act like every tournament pays out $100.
No, but I mean, if
you're gonna do 10 there, do 4 or do 20 into the 4-seamer or something like that, which has an actual payout structure.
It's like 2K to first, isn't it?
It's 5 today.
What?
It's a 50K prize pool today.
Okay, so it's still like it's 5K to first. Like, I like the first time I won 5K, I was super excited. Me now, and I mean, I think a lot of people, in their 30s or 40s or whatever, probably wouldn't care that much.
All right. Carlos Manzo says Adam is right, Josh is wrong. That is not how this question is being, like, there is no right and wrong in either of this. We're talking about 2 different play styles.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that really to me, it's just depends.
I mean, you unquestionably agree. Like, it's a worse situation for you to be under bulleted in a contest.
Yeah, you're not going to have like whatever level player you are, unless you do just like run hotter than the sun and happen to take one down early, you're going to have a better return playing contests against weaker opponents that you can play the same number of lineups. But if you're valuing DFS more as an entertainment product than anything else, then I think it's perfectly fine. It's the same. It's a similar conversation to like, should you chase live finals? If you're just trying to, maximize your returns and also not go broke, then probably not. If your goal is to make $1 million at DFS, then that's the easiest way to do it. It really is just, what you're trying to do.
If you don't care about the money you're losing in DFS, then by all means, like, be in whatever contest you want. That I don't disagree at all there. I feel like I would only want to take the real shots in like basketball when it's 100K up top. In stupid baseball contest where you get like 25, you might as well actually just get in a better contest. When it's 100K up top, that's where it gets a little different for me.
Yeah, and to be clear, like, I'll gladly take $5,000. Like, if I make $5K tonight, I'll be happy. But like, I'm not. If I'd been at work all day and I were going to come home and spend $40 or what is it, $150 on DFS, I would just get more entertainment out of it trying to take down 50K. Like, I don't have any
you would be more
like,
likely to do 10 into the relay throw today than 150
sure.
max, the mini max or something.
That's what I used to do. Like, it was kind of for different reasons, because I knew that eventually once I took it down, it would be a jump start to like my DFS career. But same kind of thing. Like, if I have a job and like I don't have any aspirations of becoming like a professional DFS player and trying to like maximize my skill set and grind up a bankroll or something, like, I would for sure just sweat out, going for 50K every night, as long as I don't care about that $150.
Fair. And that's where we're at.
Yeah, I would love. I mean, right now I would love that 5K. It could go towards my All-Star break activities.
Yeah. The real key to that conversation that we just had, I just killed like a shit ton of additional time that I needed to burn. So that stretched long. Thank you guys. I would have taken any side of that argument just to continue this conversation. That went perfectly for me. Where do you land on Braves bats? Because I think you and I are on the same page, at least for this one. The Angels are impossible to roster today.
I was just trying to see what Chris Karen said in chat, and yeah, he has some dancers in there, it looks like.
Yeah.
I didn't see what the question he was answering was, but what did you ask me?
Braves bats, because the Angels are impossible to roster today.
Yeah, the Braves I think are very difficult to get to as well.
Yeah, I'm with you.
No, I see it. 5K only lasts 2 hours in certain spots for Adam.
News God gave the super chat that said fade Sean V. Couldn't agree more. Didn't notice it before. Simon. Anything else, Braves and Angels?
No.
Now is the time, folks. We got to talk about Odd Shopper. And I got to talk about Odd Shopper a little bit while we were in Chicago. Big things coming for the platform, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But for now, you've got a free tool on your hands, and if you are into sports betting at all, you should be using it. Whether you're simply just trying to shop around for the best lines possible, and I promise you that's going to help you, and it's going to hurt the books, or at least not help the books. Or you want to check out the player props that we have posted at Odd Shopper, where you get the projection, the expected ROI, the expected win rate. All of this stuff is at Odd Shopper. But it's not just Odd Shopper. We also have the Odd Shopper YouTube channel. Plenty of sports betting content is being put out. Eric breaking down every single MLB game the night before. I'm just hitting you guys with a couple early MLB bets. Check out those things. But sports betting videos everywhere. It's just constantly coming out here. So if you're not originally subscribed to the channel that we're on right now, make sure you're hopping over to the Odd Shopper channel as well and signing up. But really, just go use the tool. Completely free for you. It's one of the best utilities you're going to find, and it will cost you absolutely $0, and it should help keep money in your pocket. Alrighty, Royals and Rays. 4.2 run implied total for the Royals, 4.8 for the Rays. Brad Keller, Drew Rasmussen, neither guy getting ownership. Are you paying down to Keller or Rasmussen?
No, it's just another spot where I don't really see a reason to do it. Rasmussen's a pretty good pitcher, but you're still talking about somebody with around a 20% strikeout percentage, likely to throw 80 to 85 pitches. Keller, not a good strikeout pitcher at all. Decent real life pitcher in terms of run prevention, 4.14 xFIP this year for Keller, but that doesn't really translate to fantasy points, and I just don't think I need to get to either guy here.
Okay.
Also, another game with an elevated total because the weather is insanely hot and humid.
All righty. Well, let's talk about the bats. And I guess we're about to talk about our number one stack for today, although mildly skewed. This is number one in top stack, number two in projected ownership. I have the Rays seventh, and I think that feels a bit more correct. The problem right now is Brandon Lau, 21% owned, is sort of driving up everything a bit for Tampa. How are you managing the Rays in this one? I like them, but I think they're overowned.
Yeah, I like them as well, but it's also a situation, I agree with you there, where it's a good spot. This is a game that has really good hitting conditions. You're facing a pitcher in Keller that doesn't miss a lot of bats. And, while on a lot of slates, Keller's somebody that you never mind taking hitters against, but you might not really love it because he's not horrible. He's certainly one of the weaker pitchers on this slate, but you're just getting more ownership going to Tampa when realistically they are very comparable to any number of other teams on the slate in terms of their chances of success. I think Brandon Lau individually is one of the better plays on the slate. He's your cash second baseman, I think. I don't really know that there's a way around that. He was in 93 of the 100 lineups I crunched before the show without any sort of randomness or anything. So very, very confident I'm going to end up with Brandon Lau in head-to-heads. And obviously he's fine in tournaments as well. But given that I am using really popular pitchers in almost every lineup, if you're a popular hitter, you're probably getting cut out of my lineups because it's not going to be that difficult, or not all of them, obviously, but cut out of a lot of the lineups that I play because it's just not going to be that difficult to find a second baseman that has the same range of outcomes as Brandon Lau, even if he doesn't project as well.
Yeah, I don't see any situation where he's not the second baseman. That price is just wildly incorrect. And I'll still be getting to a lot of these Rays bats. I just don't know if I'm going to get to that 9.5% in the aggregate mark.
Yeah, that's
what about the
pretty much.
Sorry, I was just going to kick it over to the Royals at this point.
No, I was going to say that's pretty much where I'm at as well. For example, looking, and again, take this with a grain of salt because it was before a lot of lineups came out, but looking through the teams I'm in earlier, I still had 9% Lau. That's just less than the field. Josh Lowe, I think, is actually also possible in cash as a last guy in. He was the one earlier when I said it was between Tapia and another guy for the last spot. Tapia and Lowe were the two that I was looking at, but certainly not somebody you have to have. He just kind of fit. Now
get a little bit of ownership here on the Kansas City side, not represented as much via our top stack data. I don't really see it either. I think it's just one of those situations where you're you don't mind if you one off Melendez or Witt because they're centers and centers, catchers, and shortstops.
I got over the field on KC in the crunch earlier, and I think it's pretty much the same thing that we talked about this morning. It's a team where it's almost like somebody said it's Lowe, not Lowe. It's Brandon Lau, it's Josh Lowe, and it's Nathaniel Lowe. Unless I think
that's just a joke because you can't type it's Lowe, not Low, and that not be a real. You can't read it differently.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember.
There's no way Josh is also Lau. I've never seen anybody
they'd
say
have
it
to
as
be
Lau.
Brothers.
Oh, that's true. Be careful.
But I don't know if they are or not.
I have no idea.
That's
a good point. I didn't even think about the fact that someone could have a sibling.
Yeah, it's Josh Lowe, according to the Rays media guy.
Okay.
But yeah, I knew.
I took it as a joke in chat.
Well, I wasn't sure because we had talked about it earlier, and then I was maybe they are brothers, but I didn't think that they were.
I can't imagine typing that though, being you kind of have to type it phonetically.
Right. But anyway, with KC, it's they're not a very good offense, but from a DFS standpoint, they kind of it's the parts are greater than the sum, where overall in the aggregate they're not very good, but Bobby Witt's always a good shortstop option. MJ Melendez is always a good catcher option. He's leading off today, so that looks even better. Andrew Benintendi is always going to be a solid, mid-range outfield option. Pasquantino is a good, cheap first base option. Merrifield's normally one of your better second base options. So it's just a weird team where, like, you say, oh, well, you're playing the Royals. Like, I don't want to do that. They suck. But then it's like, well, they have these 5 guys that actually look pretty good. And so I end up getting them a good amount. And that's the case here. I think Rasmussen is a good pitcher. I don't love that I'm getting to Casey, but good hitting conditions, not a ton of ownership coming in here, and certainly some guys that have plenty of upside.
The problem for the Royals is that they're the hardest team on the slate to stack. They're even harder to stack than the Angels. Do you play the first baseman Dozier, the first baseman Pasquantino, or the first baseman Prado? Because they have 3 guys in the lineup that are first base only. It makes it like their combinations are incredibly limited.
Yeah, I didn't even realize Prado was first base only. But the nice thing is Prado's hitting 7, so it's not as big a deal. The other day they had...
And Pasquantino is really good, so you just better play him.
Right. The answer is Pasquantino, followed by Dozier, followed by somebody else, followed by Prado. So it's not as bad as the other day when you had O'Hearn hitting like 5th. So it was like Pasquantino, Dozier, O'Hearn, I think 3 through 5, all at the same position.
So stupid.
So it's the Melendez, Witt, Benintendi, Pasquantino, Merrifield 5-man is like legitimately good.
865 concurrent viewers, 150 likes. I think we brought the goods on 7-game breakdowns and a little bit of discussion on contest selection. So hit that like button if you haven't done it already. It helps us out tremendously. Brewers and Rockies, 4.6 run implied total for the Brewers, 2.7 for the Rockies. Corbin Burns, Antonio Senzatella. No one's going to Senzatella. Corbin Burns, I think, very clearly the best pitcher for today's slate. 10,200 and well worth every single dollar of that price tag. 47% owned, well worth every single percentage point of that ownership. He looks exceptional today.
Yeah, completely agree. Got to like 80% of him in my crunch earlier. He's got a good matchup against Colorado. Outside of Coors Field, their active roster has an 82 WRC plus, about a 21% strikeout percentage this year. Burns has the third highest strikeout percentage on the slate behind Ohtani and Scherzer at 32.6%. 2.82 xFIP is better than every pitcher on the slate except for Ohtani. Looks really, really good. Cost isn't really prohibitive. I love getting the Burns. Like the thing with these top tier pitching is just they're all too cheap. Even though Burns and Scherzer are the most expensive on the slate, they're just all too cheap. And it makes it so that you can just build really good lineups with them and you don't get much reward for going to cheaper pitchers because you're like, sure, you can upgrade your bats, but it's like marginal upgrades while you're cutting your pitcher projection in half, basically.
Yeah, he just looks so good. This is as good of a spot as you could really get to. The only thing that could make this any better is if he just happened to pitch in a better park. Like it's just like a completely neutral park today. If this were one of the main pitchers' parks, if this were Seattle or San Francisco or something like that, I mean, the Rockies might be projected for 1.9 runs.
Yeah, I mean, or if you like made them the Angels.
Yeah, that too.
Like
getting like the monster strike. Yeah, because like the Rockies, they don't really have crazy strikeout numbers or anything like that. Like this could break so much worse.
Yeah, if this were the Angels, he'd be projected for like what 10, 11 strikeouts.
It would be close. It would be crazy. So yeah, feel free to just have all the Burns, and I would guess Burns Morton is the likely combo in cash.
Agreed.
We're not going to talk about rostering any Rockies bats. I think that would be lunacy. We're not going to talk about Senzatella. We can talk a little bit about Milwaukee, though. 6th in ownership, 10th in top stack. I'm a little bit higher on the Milwaukee side of this one. How are you feeling about the Brewers here?
I think they're fine. I didn't really get to them just because they were getting a little bit more ownership than other spots. Looking individually, you have Adames at 16%. I do think he's a very good shortstop option at 4,400. Yelich at 4,900 getting 12%. Tellez getting 10%. So I just went to some other teams, but this is another one where even though I didn't get to them in that crunch earlier, I wouldn't be surprised if I get a little bit more than I did, and I wouldn't be upset about it either because it is a good spot against Senzatella. He is another pitcher, though, where he's not as bad from a real life standpoint as you would think as a DFS player. Like he's got a 4.27 xFIP this year. Does a pretty good job limiting power, 0.75 home runs per 9, 126 expected ISO to lefties, 194 to righties, but he just doesn't strike anyone out. Only a 12% strikeout percentage. He's certainly not somebody that I'm saying like don't take hitters against Senzatella, because you certainly can. But even it's like, yeah, he's clearly one of the worst pitchers on the slate, but he's still not like a total gas can.
Do you see his BABIP?
No.
398.
Wow.
That's pretty high.
Yeah. I mean, I guess pitching in Coors Field and only striking out 12% of guys will do that.
He's just a weird guy. So he's really cut his home run per fly ball rate recently, which is interesting. Just a weird dude for pitching. You don't see a lot of guys with this profile.
Yeah, his career BABIP is 316. So, even by somebody who's pitched in Coors and never gotten strikeout standards, he's getting pretty unlucky there.
Yeah.
Ground ball percentage way down this year.
Yeah. Just a really tough guy to project. Kind of crazy that he's even been in the league as long as he has.
Yeah.
He's on a 5-year, $50 million contract. I had no idea. Good for him. Good for him.
At what point did the Rockies decide they wanted to do that?
I mean,
like, he's fine.
He's only been in the league for 6 years, so it was immediate. They just bought him out of all of his arbitration and years and stuff, I guess. Like right out of the gate.
So on Fangraphs it says 2022 to 26 with a 27 club option. So I think they did it last offseason.
Oh, that's even worse.
I mean, it's Colorado can't get pitchers to come there, so like I guess I kind of get it, but it also seems like
I think you
could have gotten him for less
than
$10 million a year.
I think you can find more of Antonio Senzatella's just laying around. Yeah, I read that. When I looked at that, it just looked different when I because it's now active in that first year, which is right. I just assumed that there was no way they just gave it to him. I mean, his 2021 per value at the bottom of the Fangraphs chart says that he was worth $28 million last year.
DFix said, are you still off Burns like you were this morning? I'm not sure who he's asking, but I wasn't off Burns this morning, and I'm not now.
Yeah, that I assume that was one of our competitor shows. That strikes me as an opinion that like lesser people would have.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of from this morning is that I had said I thought I'd be getting less Morton, that I still liked him, but I just thought I'd be getting less, which I've already said ends up not being the case. But yeah, definitely was never not on Burns.
I couldn't even make a case to not be on Burns.
Yeah, no idea.
White Sox and Guardians, 4.6 run implied total for the Sox, 3.8 for the Guardians. Lucas Giolito and Cal Quantrill. Giolito, the interesting piece here, 7,800, 7% owned. And on a different day, I would want to jump all over it. Today, I think it's like pretty much correct. Giolito.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's pretty much correct as well. The crazy thing about Giolito is that his numbers are almost identical to Charlie Morton, and Morton is getting 50% ownership while Giolito gets 5%. So this is kind of what I talked about this morning, where I was just like, I don't really know that I play that much Morton and that little Giolito, but as of right now I am, because I just have a big enough gap in projection as a result of Morton facing an Angels team that strikes out at highest rate in the league by a lot, and then Giolito facing a Cleveland team that doesn't. One thing working in Giolito's favor is he's always had that really good changeup, and this year he has a 36.5% strikeout percentage against left-handed hitters, 20.7% against righties. When you talk about Cleveland not striking out, a lot of that is derived from Ramirez not striking out and Steven Kwan not striking out. If Giolito is going to be able to just make those guys strike out anyway, then it's not quite as bad a strikeout matchup. But still, it's just easy enough to get. I think basically what's happening is what I had also said this morning I thought might happen. If you think about, like, obviously I use an optimizer, but you're still just, optimizers just like efficiently hand to build lineups basically if you're doing it right. And so when you think about it in terms of like if you were hand building, I think in a lot of the lineups where you would play Giolito, you're gonna just build your lineup out, have Giolito, and then it's either gonna be like, oh, well, I have $1,000 to get to Charlie Morton and I don't have to change anything, or it's, oh, I can just like move this one hitter that I don't really like anyway to a cheaper hitter that I feel the same way about and get to Charlie Morton. So I think it's really just that you can get low enough ownership on hitters because it's a 13-game slate that most lineups where I would have Giolito, I'm still just going to prefer to make that Charlie Morton, I think is kind of what's happened.
I was this close to making a loud joke during the middle of your sentence, and I bit my tongue on it because it was awful.
I wasn't really listening to myself, so I don't know where you would have said it.
You said the word low, and I was going to like, do you mean Lau?
Okay.
It was awful. It was legitimately terrible. We're not rostering Cal Quantrill. That much I'm pretty confident in. White Sox bats here, 14th in ownership, 9th in top stack tool. Seems like we can get to a little bit of Chicago here.
Yeah, I thought I would get to a little more than I did, but this is another team that I will be more than happy if I do get there. We have Yasmani Grandal back as well, so this lineup got even deeper than it was previously. Anderson, Moncada, Vaughn, Abreu, Grandal, Jimenez, Pollock. Like, there's a lot of talent in this lineup, and they're facing a pitcher in Quantrill who's another one of these guys that isn't a horrible major league pitcher, 4.65 xFIP, 1.07 home runs per nine, but only a 15% strikeout percentage. Certainly one of the weaker pitchers on the slate. And there's a lot of power in the White Sox lineup. Again, boosted by Grandal being back in there in place of whatever combination of Zavala, McGuire they were using instead. So I do like the White Sox and would be certainly happy if I get to them.
Cal Quantrill, with those stats, is going to be on his way to Colorado in no time for 5 years and $50 million.
50.
No strikeouts above or below average FIP.
Yeah, Colorado.
Yeah. Do you want anything from the Cleveland side of this one other than Jose Ramirez?
Not a lot that stands out. I did get to them a little bit more than the field, but I think that's just the lack of ownership that was going there. Certainly don't love this spot against Giolito. He has struggled with righties this year. That I think is in part because he does throw that changeup much more frequently to lefties. 205 expected ISO, 21% strikeout percentage against righties. But I don't really know what to do with that when you look at this Cleveland lineup and you basically have Ahmed Rosario as a right-handed bat that you would like to get, and he's 5,200. So, yeah, I don't have an argument to make for Cleveland other than they won't have much ownership.
All righty. Diamondbacks and Nats, 4.6 run implied total for the Diamondbacks, 3.9 for the Nats. Thank you guys, by the way, for the 200 likes. 900 of you in here right now. Keep hitting that thumbs up. Zach Gallen and Patrick Corbin going in this one. Neither one of these guys pulling any real ownership. Gallen is at 5%. You had some interest earlier today. Do you still?
In the same way that I have interest in Giolito and other guys in that price range, I think there would be a lot of slates where you would just be playing a lot of $7,600 Gallen. I expect to have plenty of him on the 4-game night slate, but on the main slate just ends up not really being necessary.
We know that all of the pitching is just jammed into 8,800 or higher, and that is creating the Arizona Diamondbacks as the most owned stack for today, including Carson Kelly and Jordan Luplow at 20+% ownership. They are 8th in top stack. They are the number one value, however. I'm a little bit lighter on them than that. This, to me, feels like the easiest fade on today's slate.
Yep. They're the one team that really stands out as far as ownership being problematic. And I think that's one reason why in that crunch I ran earlier, I was getting so much Miami. They're one of the only teams that give you similar value to Arizona, and they're projected for half the ownership. So I was still able to build those really high upside lineups and just use Miami instead. But yeah, I understand why they're popular. They shouldn't be this popular though on a slate of this size. I do think Carson Kelly's your cash catcher at 3,200. I do think Jordan Luplow's your a cash outfielder at 2,700. Kettle Marte, if you weren't playing Brandon Lau at second base, would be your second option in cash. But, it is a good spot. They're just getting a lot of ownership. They're the only team that we've talked about where I really think if you're playing them, you should have interest in these other pitchers that we've kind of just been saying, yeah, they're good, but I don't need to get to them.
That's where you're getting your Darvish, Gossman, Giolito, Gallen types. Right. If you're going to Arizona, that's where
JD Martinez scratched for the Red Sox.
Good to know. Cross that bridge after this show. Yeah, I'm going to be light on Arizona. That's just going to be how this works. I think they're massively overowned. And And then on the opposite side, outside of a Juan Soto one-off, I don't really want anything from Washington either.
Yeah, I don't see anything from Washington outside of, like you said,
Alrighty.
Soto is always fine.
If you're playing cash, keep your eye on the Diamondbacks. Otherwise, be very aware of what's in the rest of your lineup if you're getting to a 5-man Diamondbacks stack. 3 to go here. A's and Rangers, 3.6 run implied total for Oakland, 3.8 for the Rangers. Cole Irvin and Spencer Howard. These are 2% owned type pitchers. Are you getting to either one of these guys, or have we established where you're going at this point?
Yeah, I think we've established where I'm going. These guys both, maybe have some value on the night slate where you don't have any of those other pitchers that we've talked about. Howard is really cheap. He is in a good park, a good matchup. He also sucks, and that's really been the case his entire major league career. Even though he's supposed to have talent, he's never shown it. I just don't need to get to him on this slate. Cole Irvin, middle of the road pitcher, not a great DFS pitcher, doesn't strike out a lot of guys. Don't need him on the main slate.
Works for me. We've got Oakland 16th in ownership. We've got Texas 21st. Oakland is the second biggest value stack. I actually have them first. So I'm just flip-flopping the Diamondbacks here. Is there some appeal of going to Oakland in lieu of Arizona? Or are they just so shitty overall that they don't make up for it and the park sucks?
Yeah, I think it's mostly that one. I would rather get to Miami amongst those value stacks. They're cheap, and
Adam as the striker of the company.
Yeah, that's not it. Yeah, 100% would.
You better be shooting a double quick.
Yeah, wrestling straight out of the gate. Like there's no striking going on there.
Brody's like 6'8".
Yeah, yeah, and like everybody else is like 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there would be no striking. It would end like what was the fight the other day where I can't remember. I don't even know if you were watching it. It ended in the first minute. I think it was the Jalen Turner fight where he's like 6'2", 6'3", and he's fighting like a 5'8" dude who wanted to stand and strike and just got kicked in the head immediately.
Yeah.
No, it would be straight wrestling. But I don't know Oakland sucks. On the full slate, I don't think I get to them. On the night slate, maybe.
Okay. And then on the Texas side, they're not getting any ownership. I actually think they're a little bit more interesting. I just don't really want to go into Oakland in a giant pitcher's park and really try to get like the 10th best team. So I don't really want to get to anything here.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at also. And one thing, to keep in mind with the weather and the park, like it is reflected in projections and totals and all of that. With DFS being a game, especially on DraftKings, where like home runs are really important, that is at least like a reasonable tiebreaker too. And it loses out here where it's like 66 degrees. You have like every game on this slate being at 90 plus. So not only do you get a massive park, but you also just get cold weather.
I got nothing else here. 2 to go. Dodgers and Giants, 4.3 run implied total for LA. 3.7 for the Giants. Tyler Anderson and Logan Webb. Neither guy getting any ownership. Do you have any interest in these guys, or are we just bucketing them in the Darvish, Gossman, everybody that isn't one of the top 4 guys buckets?
That one.
We're on the same page.
Yeah. Anderson's good. Webb's good. I mentioned Anderson specifically on FanDuel in my tournament plays video earlier because at least on FanDuel, you do get a little bit bigger gap in salary between the pitchers where like all of those good pitchers are up around 11K. Anderson is at 8,700. He's really low owned. I think probably I would still just play those top 4 pitchers, but he did kind of just stand out as somebody going a little bit under owned. But on DraftKings where you're not really getting any meaningful salary savings, it's really tough for me to get there. And then Webb on the other side, really good pitcher, but facing the Dodgers.
And the opposite side of that coin is that I would love to normally get to some Dodgers, but on the opposite side is Logan Webb, and he is good. And for the Giants, like I think they're solid enough. Tyler Anderson isn't all that interesting to me, but I think the long and short here is that I don't get to too much. I mean, I have the Giants 18th, I have the Dodgers 17th. There's no ownership here. Is this a place for stacks?
I don't really see it. Like both of these pitchers are good. You have the pinch hitting risk with the Giants as well. We just got their lineup. So, Slater leading off at 3,500, Ruff at 3K. Those are reasonable price tags, but also a pretty good chance that those guys are coming out of the game at some point. Yeah, just not a particularly interesting team to me.
Perfect. You're good for both sides here?
Yep.
And then we close it out. Mariners and Astros. 4.1 run implied total for the Mariners. 4.3 for the Astros. Marco Gonzalez and Jose Urquidy. Neither guy getting any ownership. Has anything changed for you here on Gonzalez or Urquidy?
Nope.
Easy enough there. Then we will talk a little bit about bats. You had some interest in the Houston Astros earlier today. They are 7th in top stack, 9th in ownership. I got them 8th. I think they're basically properly owned. I'd be happy to have a little bit, but the Seattle Park really negates scoring.
Yeah, I didn't get to this game as much as I thought I would this morning. I kind of hope that changes, but Gonzalez doesn't miss a lot of bats. You obviously have a lot of power in the Houston lineup. If you are stacking Houston also, don't sleep on Alvarez and Tucker. Left-handed power against Marco Gonzalez does not have any issues whatsoever. 189 expected ISO to lefties, 382 expected WOBA to lefties for Gonzalez this year. Actually worse than he's been against righties. So if you are going to Houston, don't worry about the lefty-lefty matchup.
There we go. Yeah, I'll have a little bit, nothing crazy. I think the 5% that they're getting owned is sort of where they should be. Do you see anything on the Seattle side of this one that makes you a little bit more intrigued?
It's kind of the same thing. Like, I like the Mariners, but I think it's just the park is knocking them down enough. I wasn't getting there. Julio Rodriguez at 57 or 5,600 is always a very high upside option. Urquidy has had issues with right-handed bats this year, only striking out 16%. 257 expected ISO is a massive number. So Rodriguez, I think, looks really good individually. Ty France looks good. Suarez looks good. Winker at 4K. I'll play against pretty much anybody. So all of that looks good. It's just, I don't know, the park, the weather, not on par with a lot of other spots on this slate.
Do we have anything else that we need to talk about here, Mariners and Astros?
Nope.
Favorite stacks for today? Let's close it out.
I mean, I guess as of last time I did this, Miami. But this is still really, it's tough to answer because I just don't have strong preferences amongst these teams. There's no cut and dry top end. So, I mean, I think the Yankees and the Blue Jays and the Rays are probably the best stacks, but they're also getting some ownership. I like Miami as a value stack at lower ownership than Arizona rather. If I can get to some White Sox, I like that. The Red Sox did get weaker with Martinez out, so might not get as much there. I do like the Orioles against Tyon. I like the lineup they're running out there.
Scherzer, Burns, Ohtani, Morton?
Yep.
Which pitcher not in that group is the one that cracks the top 4 of scoring?
Giolito.
Which pitcher in that top 4 is the bust?
The way my stuff looks right now, hopefully Ohtani.
There we go. Deeper dive in the books, folks. Don't go anywhere, but do hit that like button in the interim. MLB Live Before Lock coming up next. Stay right here. Don't have to leave the stream at all. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Good luck tonight. We will talk to you later.
What's going on, everybody? Eric Lindquist at Stokastic coming to you with my 3 prize picks plays of the day, like I always do here during the weekdays. Good to have a nice full slate back, but hey, went 3-0 yesterday, so let's run it back once more. That was kind of an interesting spot. Rodon over 6.5. That was beautiful. We also got the over on both hitters going against him. I do some weird stuff from time to time, but hey, ended up panning out because I ended up playing some decent plays around them and made some money. Let's do the same for you guys today, but guarantee yourself a win by depositing using promo code AWESEMO. Yes, it is still promo code AWESEMO at the top right portion of your screen there. Get $100 first match deposit bonus. All right. The story of the day for me, it is July 22nd here on this lovely Friday, and it looks like, it's hot in LA, but my God, it is going to be hot in a lot of places today, and I'm going to go down the line with 3 plays that I like from, I think, some of the best game environments we've seen in non-Coors spots in quite some time, but we're just going to go right off the bat to the runs plus RBIs. Wilson Contreras, we want the over of 0.5 runs plus RBIs. Looking at books, his runs prop is around -115 to -120 at pretty much any book that you're looking at. The RBIs always come along for free. I always think that that's kind of a nice little benefit when you're playing these, is that there's multiple outs for having that still work out for you. So you're getting a -115 on the runs. Well, then you're also getting the RBIs to come for the ride, even though generally more unlikely. That's kind of how it's priced in for every player. under the sun unless you're a leadoff hitter that just has a ton of speed. But we continue on. I just think Wilson Contreras against Kyle Gibson. It is 92 degrees in Philadelphia. This is one of the best home run spots, I think, on the board today. Justin Steele, he's been better of late for the Cubbies pitching there. So, I mean, I'm going to be looking at getting some Phillies props, but he's been really preventing hard contact. You know who hasn't? Kyle Gibson of the Phillies, former Twin. God rest his soul. I love him very much. But anyway, not anymore. 19.8% K percentage, not missing bats, a 415 expected slugging. And you know who hits the ball very high and very far is Wilson Contreras, 9-degree average launch angle, 49.3% hard hit percentage, and a 463 expected slugging. The dew point, 67 degrees, 92-degree temperatures. I don't really know what else I need to say. It is an absolute smash. I think this number is wrong. This should... It's hard because, you know, obviously he would just have to not be on the board if you're going to play him in this 0.5 runs plus RBIs. But hey, we're happy he's there. Good to have you, my friend. Wilson Contreras, the over 0.5 first play of the day. We're going to another game environment. I said I was doing that, so, you know, I'm not backing down on that now. And I'm looking at Bobby Witt Jr. Boom. He is going to be an over of 0.5 runs plus RBIs as well. He's minus 125, minus 130 across every single book that I'm looking at. Again, RBIs come along for the ride. And my God, Drew Rasmussen, however you want to say such a name, not very good. 43% hard hit percentage, giving up, you know, a 9-degree launching, a little bit lower, but like not a ground ball rate that has anything substantial. A 406 expected slugging, also not missing bats, a 20.8% K percentage on the season. And Bobby Witt Jr., as good as advertised, starting to come alive here in the second half of the first half of the season, also known as like a quarter, but that's a different conversation later. Bobby Witt, 427 expected slugging, 41.9% hard hit percentage. I am all about this Kansas City team as well today. Think he's got the best prop available. There's some spots we can find some other value, but Bobby Witt Jr., look at that, fresh-faced individual. He's there. He's going to hit bombs. So there you go. He doesn't need hit bombs. He just has to score a run or hit somebody in. So there you go. Another spot. Oh, I should tell you the temperature because that's kind of what I was getting at for why I like these plays so much. 97 degrees in Kansas City at first pitch. 68% dew point. Longer ballpark than you're looking at in Philadelphia. So whatever. The wind's blowing out there to 10 miles per hour to left. Wow. These game environments are just wild. But we haven't even got to, I think, the best game environment.
What is happening, everybody? It is time for Stokastic MLB Live Before Lock. I know we did an MLB Live Before Lock yesterday, Eric and I. It was more of a shorter, abbreviated version. We don't typically do 2-game slates, but we had such a long layoff because of the All-Star break that we felt obligated to do one. But today, this is the real deal. The real deal, Holyfield. Terry and I breaking down MLB DFS, 13-game slate, and despite all of the games, the pitching options pretty limited. So the pitcher ownership really concentrated. That's going to make for some interesting talking points. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Terry, it's been exactly a week since I last talked to you. How you been?
Been pretty good, bud. It's got a lot of content in over the All-Star break, oddly. I got to talk about the All-Star game with Gunn and did a couple shows and stuff over the weekend. And then, last few days, just been a lot of downtime until that slate yesterday afternoon. But took advantage, went and saw Nope yesterday after I got my lineups in. Give it a solid couple thumbs up. Seems like everybody in the world is going for that Nope, yup reference when they do their review. So I'm just going to go old school, 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, so today's been an interesting day for me, mostly because as always, there's a lot of work going on in my house. This is never ending since I moved in. Always trying to get things up to date, always getting different parts of the house redone and getting stuff painted right now and my deck done. And one of the workers came upstairs to use my bathroom, and unbeknownst to me. So I walk into my bathroom to take a piss, and there's a Hispanic guy taking a shit on my toilet, which, I mean, to me, I'm like, oh, okay. I was not expecting that. And like, you don't really know what to say. You're caught off guard. So I leave. I use a different bathroom, come back in my bathroom like an hour later, shit everywhere. He had listen.
Oh no.
If
I mean, that was going to be
there's-
my first question, but
if there's skid marks on the toilet, whatever, right? It happens to the
like
best of us. It happens to the worst of
the
us too.
toilet. Yeah, like
But I mean, it's on the toilet seat. Some of it's on the floor next to the toilet somehow. It was terrible. So I had to clean it all up, and then I took a shower. It was not enjoyable.
You had to clean it. Like, why didn't you just go downstairs and grab the guy and be like, "Hey, man, you got I'm paying you to fix my house, not shit on my floor." Like,
they were already gone by then, for starters.
Right,
Second of all, too, like I don't even know how to approach. First, he doesn't speak fluent English. Like none of the guys working on my house right now speak fluent English. And so I don't know what I'm gonna grab my sister-in-law to translate for me.
I feel like shit on the floor is universal in all languages. Like that's one that just gets across language barriers.
If I'm that guy and I say there's shit on the floor, I'm just saying no comprendo and I'm moving on. But that was for me, that was what I was dealing with before the show. I had to clean up shit, take a toilet, clean the toilet up, and then I took a shower afterwards. But we got an MLB.
Some hazmat gear there, some gloves, some masks. Yeah, I think everybody wants to talk more about this, honestly.
I've got those, like the magic wand type thing where it's really easy to clean with it. It comes in the package with like 30 of the packets, and it's
the little blue
wand,
thing,
and then you just put the thing with soap on the end of it, and then you just pop it off. So I cleaned with that, and whatever we may do, but it's been on my mind, and I can't get it off my mind over the last.
Okay, last question about it, and then we'll stop. I swear. Do you think that he was having a normal experience in there, and then you walked in and he was like, "Hey, fuck that guy. He just walked in on me. I'm going to take it out on him." Or do you think this was what was going on regardless of your walking in situation?
I don't know. I know that they primarily eat McDonald's and Burger King when they're painting, which I assume has some sort of role in it.
That's going to.
But he could have locked the door too. I just don't expect to be home alone and go into my bathroom and there's somebody who doesn't speak English taking a shit on my toilet. So listen, these things happen, but we've got a baseball slate to talk about too, and really, really concentrated pitcher ownership. Like I was saying before, there's only 4 pitchers that are really garnering any kind of ownership on DraftKings or FanDuel. We're going to break down those pitchers, but if you guys want access to even more of the tools we have over on the site, Top Stacks tool, that is free to use today. But everything from player projections, ownership projections, and everything else that you'd possibly need to build winning MLB DFS lineups, what you want to do is sign up for a Stokastic Plus Platinum membership and use the promo code MLB Live when you're signing up for the first time, because that's going to get you 50% off your first week of the package. Stop guessing, start winning, join Awesemo Plus today. So first, just an overarching view of this slate, Terry. How much are you deviating from the 4 chalk pitchers, or do you think it's all warranted?
I think it's pretty warranted. I was saying in chat during the last show that there are a few spots of low cost, low ownership guys that I'm at least a little bit intrigued by. Decent pitchers in decent matchups, like a Zach Gallen going against the Nationals. I'm kind of intrigued by that spot. I'll probably get a little over the field to the single digit ownership. Like it's really easy to get over the field on anybody that I want. Lucas Giolito could definitely put up a nice start against the Guardians here. I know they're low strikeout, but he's Lucas Giolito. He comes in at fair price, single digit ownership. Yu Darvish, low ownership. So I'm willing to spread some shares around, but there's a lot of good reason behind why Burns, Scherzer, and Charlie Morton, in my opinion, are that highly owned. Shohei Ohtani, I get a little bit of a ding in my projections just because of how the way things come together, but I do get it. Tons of strikeouts available in that Braves offense. They're just lethal for power, lethal for run creation against right-handed pitching. So I'm a little bit more concerned about Ohtani, but the top 3, Burns, Scherzer, and Morton, yeah, I understand the ownership. I'll be probably under the field, but only a little bit. I like all 3 of those guys in all 3 of those spots.
All right. So I think we need to do some comparison points here as well. And here's where FanDuel and DK are going to be a little bit different, because in terms of the price tiers, the players are grouped a little bit differently. And Terry, I know you primarily play on FanDuel. I primarily play on DraftKings, though I do play on both. But I think we could kind of break these down from a FanDuel and DK perspective and just look at the different groupings. So first, I'm going to ask you about FanDuel. We've got Burns, Scherzer, Ohtani. They're all fairly close together in price. Scherzer, the most expensive, 11.5. We got Burns at 11.3, Ohtani at 11,000. We do have Ohtani picking up much less ownership than Burns. Burns being the chalkiest play of that upper tier, 28% ownership on FanDuel. But how do you rank those guys? Burns, Scherzer, Ohtani, ownership being considered on FanDuel. Who is your highest priority, your lowest priority? Or actually, I'll ask you this way. Fuck, marry, kill on FanDuel. Burns, Scherzer, Ohtani. What are you doing?
I'm probably going to be taking Max Scherzer home and having my way with him if that's the case. 15% ownership versus the 30% that Corbin Burns is pulling, and I'm getting a higher projection in my numbers on Max Scherzer. We have Burns ranked ahead of Scherzer, but I think for the 200 more, I'm happy to cut the ownership share in half there and take Max Scherzer home. I would put Corbin Burns in the, I guess, marry spot then, which means I really like him. I'll have plenty of them, but if I'm really going out in the town, I'm going to be going out with my other special lady, Max Scherzer. And then I guess it was Ohtani was the last guy on that list. He would be the bottom of the barrel. He'd be the one that I kick out of the car off the side of the bridge.
So you're offing Ohtani, dirty sex with Max Scherzer in his crazy eyes, which I don't think is.
There we go.
If you want somebody who is going to be a little wild when it comes to I think Max Scherzer's your guy. And then I agree with you also. Fiery. Yeah, and you're also getting half the ownership compared to Corbin Burns, so I think that's all reasonable. But one point I want to ask you about Max Scherzer, and then we'll do kind of something similar for DK purposes, and then we'll talk about Charlie Morton after. Is the weather at all a concern for you when it comes to Scherzer? Because I know you live in the New York, New Jersey area as well, and there's a chance of some storms later on in the day. So the one concern I do have about Max Scherzer is what happens if we get into the third or fourth inning and rain starts to fall. It's not something that's impacting my lineups at all. But is it something you're considering at all?
Not really. It hadn't been something that was really that much on my radar. I was looking at the weather before because we do have, like, in my little corner of windows here on my computer, it had a little umbrella over the sun a little while ago. And I was like, oh shit, maybe there's some rain coming. But I pulled up the radar. It looks pretty clear. And it looks like anything that is on the radar is going like well north of where Queens is. So it's like northwest of us. I don't really see it impacting that game. So I'm not that concerned about it. Yeah, I think we get away with that Mets game. I'm not concerned about really any weather spots. Looks like just a lot of like humid, muggy kind of spots, but nothing that's really going to get impacted. I don't think. Nothing where I'd be changing my lineups.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I just wanted to bring it up because I know there's going to be people that ask about it as we go throughout the show. So I want to make sure that we did bring it up at least as some sort of talking point here. And then going over to DK, we have Scherzer and Burns once again grouped fairly close together, but this is where the tiers are a little bit different, DraftKings compared to FanDuel, because on DK, Ohtani's only 9,000 compared to him being at the 11K range over on FanDuel. So we've got Burns and Scherzer. That's more of the comparison point than Ohtani and Morton. That's going to be a separate one for DK. So I want to ask you, how would you approach Burns and Scherzer when the difference over on DraftKings is that we've got both of them being fairly popular, 48% ownership for Burns compared to 34% ownership for Scherzer. So the gap isn't quite the same as it is on FanDuel, where Burns is double the ownership. When you consider that Burns is a little bit closer to Scherzer on DK in the overall picture of the slate, does that change at all how you view these two compared to each other?
It draws them a little bit more even. The matchup for Burns, I think, is a little bit better. I would take that matchup a little bit more often, but I don't think all that much of the pods either here. So I'm willing to go with either one of them. I would probably just kind of look to split it down the middle and get to my fair share of both of them. I would, again, probably just be a little bit under the field's numbers on each. And since the field, since it is still a 30 max is on the lower end of that, I would probably nudge them so that they're flipped so that I've got a little bit more max, a little bit less Burns, just go the opposite route of the field while still having just a ton of both of them. They're easily my top two projected pitchers, but the way they're projecting out, I do have max a little bit ahead of Burns in terms of just raw projection. So I would kind of follow that. I don't think you're making a mistake by any means if you do it the other way around, though.
Yeah, so for me, I just think Burns is a safer play. He's the married choice. This is the guy that we're spending the rest of our lives with. And
safe, exactly.
I really do like Corbin Burns, and it's just an easier matchup for him too. Not to say that the matchup against the Padres is the most difficult imaginable, but I do think Burns is a better pitcher than Scherzer, and Burns going up against the Colorado Rockies on the road against a right-hand pitcher, it's always a favorable matchup. So at least for DK purposes, I really do have a lean towards Corbin Burns. But next, I want to ask you about the difference between Shohei Ohtani and Charlie Morton. I know you said about Ohtani over on FanDuel, it's a little bit different of an outlook because he's priced at 11,000, but on DK, he's only 9K, and Charlie Morton's 8,800. And something else that stands out to me, Morton is the most popular pitcher over on DK. He's projected for north of 50% ownership. And of the four chalk plays on DK, Ohtani is the least popular of the four. So I view Ohtani as a really good pivot off of Charlie Morton, especially in single entry contests, because if there's this much of a gap just in large field tournaments, it's probably going to be magnified in single entry fields where maybe we see Ohtani at like 15% and Morton somewhere around 60-ish% or something like that. So I would really like going to Ohtani as a pivot off of Morton. Obviously, the matchup for Morton's easier because this Angels offense strikes out so frequently. But Ohtani's been lights out good as a pitcher over the last couple of months. If I'm not mistaken, something like his last 7 starts, he's a .64 FIP, something along those lines, generating a whole bunch of strikeouts. So I like getting to Ohtani as a pivot off of Morton, and I do think he's a really strong GPP play over on DK, where I think he could potentially get a little bit buried relative to the other chalk. But Ohtani versus Morton, how do you view these two for DraftKings purposes? Then we'll talk about Morton over on FanDuel.
Yeah, I'm actually a little surprised that Morton is coming up as the higher owned out of the two. And I think it's just because of the respect that people give to this Braves lineup in terms of their offensive upside. Like I said before, plenty of strikeouts available. 25.4% puts them 28th in baseball against right-handed pitching, but they're also first in baseball for ISO against righties, first in baseball with a 4.43% home run rate, 10th with a 107 WRC plus. So they're very good hitting home runs, hitting for power, creating runs against righties. But Ohtani's been on another level his last handful of starts, like you said, and just very, very good overall. 35.4% strikeout rate to chase those strikeouts against righties, a 2.43 xFIP, a 2.31% home run rate. So if you believe in Ohtani's talent, and I certainly do, and his ability to overcome the upside of the Braves here, he can find plenty of strikeouts to pay off that salary. And that difference, that $2,000 salary difference, is really where you fall in love with Ohtani going from site to site. And the fact that you can pick up 20% on the ownership that Morton and these other guys are getting, it definitely makes some sense to bump Ohtani up in your esteem at least over Morton, and potentially at least put him in line with those other two, because you can do a lot with that 2,000 cost savings.
It's a bad lineup. No, this lineup it's a very bad, no good lineup for the Angels today. And a couple of things come into play with this. And to bring a betting angle into this, I'll tell you, Terry, I do have a bet on this game. And it's actually the under strikeouts for Charlie Morton, not because I don't expect him to strike out a whole bunch of guys. I do. But the number opened up at 8.5. That seems like a really lofty number for Charlie Morton. Where do you have him for strikeouts? Because I know over on OddsShopper, let me see where we have it now. But earlier in the day, we had him projected for a little over 7 strikeouts, which is obviously a really high expected strikeout number. But 8.5 for a pitcher like Charlie Morton, not to say he isn't good. I just don't know there's any sort of expectation for me that there would ever be a line that should be 8.5. So I do like the under here. Does that seem reasonable to you? Where you come out on his strikeouts?
Yeah, I was actually a little lower than the site. I have him just over 6.5. So I would be very comfortable taking the under on 8.5 there. Very good pitcher, but 27.1% strikeout rate. We're not talking about one of these, 30+% guys. He's pushed that level in seasons past, but he's not been that guy for the last couple of seasons. Again, very good. I think he could have a very nice DFS game. There's a reason he's going to be 50% owned for 8,800 on DK. There's a reason he's popular on FanDuel at 9,800. But yeah, for just the pure over under on the strikeouts, I'd firmly on the under.
Yeah. And by the way, in terms of the top 4 pitchers, I think all of these guys are great plays. These are my 4 most rostered pitchers today. Like, I think we could go off the board a little bit with some other guys, but I think all 4 of these are very warranted plays. So one more thing I want to ask you about the chalk pitchers, and then we'll move on to talk about where we might want to pivot. If you were playing a cash lineup on FanDuel, who is the pitcher that you're putting in that lineup?
Cash lineup. Let me just take a look at the tools here.
While you're pulling that up, it's going to be Corbin Burns for me. I just think there's so much safety and security that comes with him.
Yeah. I mean, you're picking up the top. I'll go with the sites rankings. The top, you're getting the top guy. You're saving $200 over Scherzer. You're riding along with the field. I was considering just throwing Morton into the mix, because he's only, you're talking about the difference between 9.8% of being the top pitcher and 7.3% for a decent chunk of change less. And the same amount of ownership and popularities for the blocking purposes for cash games. So I wouldn't disagree with anybody who said Morton was the right answer there and take the savings. But yeah, for upside and pure, fantasy scoring, I think Burns is the right answer.
And then for DK, my answer would be Burns and Morton. I just think, number one, the salary for Morton, but then also just playing the ownership game. I just want to block out where I think these 4 guys are all very viable, close options as far as plays go. But with Burns and Morton being the 2 most popular, I think it just makes sense to play the ownership game and play them in cash games at least.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And just try and block that out and then be on the right bats and win it that way. But I do not play a lot of baseball cash.
All right. So it sounds like your dog's opinionated on some pitcher.
He's got some kind of opinion on there. He might have been disagreeing on who having to marry Corbin Burns and have him be mommy, I guess.
Yeah, maybe he's just like, no, Terry, you're not bringing Max Scherzer's crazy. You're not bringing him home for a one night stand. Not to this household. I'll defend it with my life. Let's start talking about pivots now, though, because those 4 pitchers are tremendously chalky. And for reference for everybody right now in our ownership projections, we have Morton and Burns both around 50% on DK. Morton a little above, Burns a little bit below. And then we've got Scherzer and Ohtani both projected north of 30% ownership. We don't have another single pitcher project more than 6% ownership over on DK. For FanDuel, we've got Morton, Ohtani, Scherzer, Burns. They're combined to make up, just doing quick math in my head, 85% of the pitcher ownership on FanDuel. So if you're playing anybody else, you're really deviating. So I want to know, of the pitchers on the slate who are not the top 4, who is the guy that stands out the most to you?
I think that it's weird. I didn't expect this to be my answer earlier, but Tyler Anderson is projecting fairly well for me against the Giants. He's projecting fairly well for the site. 1.7% owned on DK, coming up at 1.3% on FanDuel for 8,700. I think he's kind of interesting. I think maybe Darvish is a compelling answer there, because we're talking about a guy who, at least in years past, has been on the caliber of a Shohei Ohtani, maybe not a Scherzer, but he's been toward that level before, but not pitching at that same level. Tougher matchup against the Mets. And then I like the spot for Zach Gallen a little bit, but I believe in the pitcher a little bit less, I think. And Giolito, it's the opposite. I like the pitcher a lot more, but I believe in the situation a little less. So those are my guys if I'm spreading shares out. But I also think there's, some upside in your Kevin Gausman's, Nathan Eovaldi's, Logan Webb's of the world. Just good pitchers, not in good situations, but just not getting any attention whatsoever. So if I just grab a handful of shares of a lot of these different guys and just spread it out for any lineups that aren't getting burned, Scherzer and Morton for me on FanDuel, I'm pretty happy with any way that comes out, as long as it's just, a handful of Logan Webb shares, even in a tough spot against the Dodgers, a handful of Zach Gallen shares, because I don't really trust him, but he's only 2.7% owned in what I perceive to be a good matchup against the Nats for 8,100. So I think you can get over the field on a few of those guys and take advantage of just the ridiculous ownership going to the Aces, while still getting to a fair share of the Aces.
It's going to be Giolito for me if I'm going off the board, strictly based on strikeout upside. I don't know what Giolito's issue is this year, but he's getting hit hard, giving up a lot of home runs and tapping pretty frequently to him. So his ground ball rate is down this year. That's an issue. His home run to fly ball rate is up. That's also an issue. And you combine it with the down ground ball rate. The only thing that remains is the strikeout rate, which for DFS purposes, 27.1% K rate. When things go well for Lucas Giolito, there's tremendous upside. Is it a high probability play? Absolutely not. The dude's sucked as of late. But when it goes well, there's the strikeout upside, which I do think of any of the pitchers who are not the top end pitchers. Is it fair to say that regardless what we think of Giolito as a real life pitcher at the moment, it's hard to deny the strikeout upside? Would you say he is the most strikeout upside of any pitcher on the slate who isn't chalky?
On pure talent, I think that's definitely correct. 27.1% strikeout rate this year, 27.9 last year. The swinging strikes are down this year, 12.6%. Last year it was a 15.3%. So if he can boost that, we might see that strikeout rate tick up a little bit. Like we've said a couple times, like they said on the last show, Cleveland is a good team at avoiding strikeouts against right-handed pitching. 17.4% strikeout rate. That's best in baseball out of 30 teams, first overall. But some of that is focused on guys like Stephen Kwan, 8.5% strikeout rate. Not a big upside DFS player. He's got a 0.80 ISO, 1 home run on the season. Jose Ramirez, fantastic DFS player, fantastic baseball player, 9.9% strikeout rate. Those guys do cut into it, but you don't really have a lot of guys like the two top end, the two highest strikeout rate guys right now are Nolan Jones and Luke Malley in the starting lineup, 27.3% and 26%. There's some guys in the teens, low 20s here. So it's not the easiest matchup in the world, but I agree on talent. Lucas Giolito easily is the next best target for strikeouts.
And then do you have any idea, because I've been trying to figure this out, what is wrong with Lucas Giolito? Because I've been trying to look at some of the numbers and figure it out. And it's really hard to say, especially because he's still generating strikeouts. It's not like that's totally dissipated. With Yu Darvish on today's slate, that's a pitcher whose results haven't been quite as good this year as in previous years, but he isn't generating strikeouts. So it's easy to see why. It's weird to me that you see somebody like Giolito, who his career strikeout rate is 25.4%, this year 27.1%. His career walk rate 9%, this year 8.5%. So that stuff all seems decent. It's weird that the K rate and the walk rate would be in line, but the earned run and all that goes up so much. So do you have any idea what it might be that's throwing him off here?
So it looks like, for one, he's suffering from some bad luck. 338 batting average on balls in play against. Every other season of his career was below 273. His career is 272. So right out of the gate, you're talking about 50 points of batting average against. That's kind of circumstantial based on a little bit of luck happenstance. His xFIP 366 is actually lower than last year's 375. Like I said, the swinging strikes are down. The whip is obviously way up with that increased BABIP. So I think there's just some bad luck in here. It does seem like he's probably leaving some stuff fat over the plate, maybe as he's trying to find some of the strikeouts here. 42.7% hard hit is way up from 34.2% last year. 10.4% barrels, way up from 6.7%. That leads you to a bump from a 375 home run rate to a 4.26% home run rate. So I think there's some contact happenstance in there. Definitely a lot of batting average on balls in play happenstance in there. So probably just getting a little bit unlucky. I haven't had a chance to peel back the onion and like look pitch by pitch at how some of his stuff is working and what the pitch mixes look like. So there might be some, substantial change in there that I'm not aware of. But right now on the surface, it does look like just some happenstance in here. So this could be not necessarily get right spot based on matchup, but he could flip that script just any given night and give you a dominant start.
So here's one final pitcher bet for you, Terry. I want to get your input on this because it's Lucas Giolito. We're just talking about him. I don't know what to expect from this guy. He's all over the place, tremendously inconsistent. 9+ strikeouts, 10-1 odds though. So you're just
spot to make that bet against.
But you're just playing you're playing the bell curve game here, right?
Yep.
And you go, this is a pitcher with a really wide range of outcomes. And basically in this spot, 1 out of every 10 starts or better, does he strike out 9+ hitters? I'm going to say yes.
I don't think that's unreasonable. I tell you what, I do have him projected over 6.5 in my model, which I thought was a lot when I saw it this afternoon, based on the matchup here. And it's kind of supporting why I like Giolito in this spot. So yeah, with that in mind, with the idea that you only have to hit it so many times, I don't mind it.
All right. So we've talked about most of the pitchers here, but one final thing. I don't see too many guys I really want to punt with at pitcher. Is there anybody for any reason you're willing to take shares of who's just a punt play, whether it's a DraftKings price, FanDuel price, Spencer Howard, somebody else, any cheap pitcher that stand out to you think you would feel okay backing?
Feel okay is very strong. I think at 5,900, there's a weird argument to be made that Patrick Corbin could give you one of those outlier starts against Arizona. I wouldn't completely rule it out, but that's only if you're saying I need to spend less than 6,000 on DraftKings at pitcher. At 8,000 on FanDuel, I just think he's too expensive there. I'd just rather have Zach Gallen on the other side of that one for 81. I'd probably rather have Braxton Garrett for 77, Miami against Pittsburgh. Good matchup. He's more expensive on DK. He's 74 versus the 59 that Corbin is, but he's probably my answer there. I also think Drew Rasmussen probably a little cheap on DK, but I think that KC offense is also a little bit interesting. So I would probably look to be on both sides of that. I don't really love me any Spencer Howard. I do love the matchup, but he's just not coming through really. He projects in like the low 20s with FanDuel scoring here for me. So not really a spot I'll be chasing, but I do get it based on the matchup.
Yeah, I considered him very briefly and then hated myself. I was like, well, what am I going to do? Like, what do I need this guy for? Anytime I've rostered him this year, it's gone poorly. He's really cheap, but I just don't need the salary savings. And this is something that's been really true on DraftKings this year. And I brought it up so many times. I don't know if Eric's still in chat, but he was before, but it's something him and I have brought up on a lot of the shows we do together, is that DraftKings just nerfed the pricing of the high-end pitchers today. So when you've got Morton at 8,800, Ohtani at 9,000, Burns 10,2, you just don't need to save that much salary at pitcher. And then you always get, especially on 13-game slates, you're always going to get hitters that are in decent spots near the top of the order, like Raimel Tapia, for instance, on DK, min price batting leadoff. You're going to have hitters that have some semblance of talent that are decent lineup spots that are so cheap that it's just not that hard to get up to the top tier guys. So ultimately, when I looked at the slate earlier this morning, I thought, oh, Spencer Howard, that could be an interesting contrarian play. And then I build my lineups and it's totally unnecessary. So none of that for me. Are there any other pitchers you want to talk about or any other points you want to make about the pitchers? If not, we'll head on over to the stacks.
No, like I said, it's just a night where I'll probably spread around just a handful of shares to each one of these guys that are a little bit, ranking out a little bit lower for me. And, it wouldn't totally shock me if like a Jamison Tyone came out and had a decent start against Baltimore, but he cost 9,100 on FanDuel. He cost 83 on DK. That's a little bit more playable, but there's just a lot of guys like that who aren't getting any attention, where it wouldn't shock me if he gave you a serviceable start for the price for that. So I'll be spreading some around, but I agree. I don't see a reason to dip all the way down to the Spencer Howards, the Brad Kellers, the Marco Gonzalez's of the world. I think there's plenty of quality up the board from those guys.
All right, so we're going to talk about offense here. Do us a favor, though, first, guys. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, we're bringing up Odd Chopper on the show. If you guys want to check it out, if you guys are into sports betting, it's free to use. All you have to do is put in your email address, and then you get access to all the best prop bets each day. And it takes like 10 seconds to place these bets. You go over to the site, you see the projected ROIs, projected win rates. You see what sportsbook has the best number post. You head on over, you post that bet. Super easy to use. But we're getting a lot of people asking us for dong picks. And I have to be honest, Terry, if somebody tells me that they need a dong pick, I don't ever want to fail to deliver. So we're going to do that in a second, guys. We're going to give you the dong picks. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. First thing we're going to do is answer my Phillies super chat. Then Terry, get some dong picks queued up, because that's what the people really, really want. They are chomping at the bit for some dong picks. But first, my Phillies guys, what do you think of these for prize picks? Ohtani under 8 Ks and Contreras over 0.5 runs and RBI. So first, which Contreras?
Yep. Which Contreras is a big part of that question. Although,
so my Phillies, just throw that into the chat. You don't have to leave another super chat or anything. Just throw in YouTube chat which Contreras, because there's multiple of them in the MLB. It's one of those really common names. It's like if you ask me, what do you think of over X amount of points for Smith in the NBA?
There's I assume we're talking about Wilson or William, the brothers, who were.
Yeah, I would assume so also, but I'd still like to know which one.
Yeah, it's an important part of the equation. What was the over-under we were asking on the Ohtani strikeouts?
Ohtani 8 strikeouts. I think that's pretty fair.
He was saying he was looking at the under or the over?
He's looking at the under. If I had to pick a side, it would be the under. But I have to think there's better plays on prize picks.
Probably also agreed there. Yeah, because it is a high strikeout matchup going up against Atlanta there. But I do have them projected out below that. Oddly low. And again, it's because of how good Atlanta's offense is. It kind of impacts my projected innings pitched a little bit. So based on what I have here, I would prefer the under, but I agree. There's probably just a better pick to be made.
Yeah, if I'm picking a side, it's going to be the under, but also keep in mind the over under for strikeouts at sportsbooks for Ohtani today is 8.5. You generally don't want to be playing something on prize picks when a better number is available elsewhere. So that's something else to consider. Also, my Phillies, because if you really like the under strikeouts for Ohtani, why take 8 when you get 8.5 elsewhere? So I would say probably there's going to be a better one elsewhere. He hasn't answered us yet on Contreras. I'm going to assume he means Wilson, just because it doesn't seem to make. Well, maybe he does like William Contreras going up against the Angels if he's on the under on Ohtani. But let's assume that it is Wilson Contreras, and on the mound for the Phillies today, it is Kyle Gibson. I'm not super high on Kyle Gibson as a pitcher. He liked the over 0.5 runs and RBIs. But it's still tough though. That seems that it's tough to reliably predict runs and RBIs. If I had to take a side, I'd go with the over, but where do you stand on that? Wilson Contreras over under 0.5 RBIs. If it does end up being William Contreras, or we'll come back to it.
Yeah, I think we can get there with Wilson. Hitting second in that lineup is going to give him a nice amount of plate appearances. He's a guy who gets on base at a 36% clip, 366 on base percentage, a 201 ISO. So he hits for power, 13 home runs on the season. We know he can drive the ball. We know he can get on base at a reasonable clip, creates runs 33% better than average. So you're making a good selection there against a pitcher who gives up, an average around 4 runs, 3.97 xFIP. They've got a 4.3 implied run total. So I definitely think if you're picking somebody from that Cubbies lineup to be involved, he's a pretty damn good pick.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense to me. I'll side a little bit more with the Padres Mets will be delayed due to rain Friday. I think this is a better situation for Scherzer because I'm looking the same thing as you, Terry. I look out my window, which unfortunately my window broke. I got it replaced and the new one broke also. I don't know what the deal is with that, but so the weather outside right now, it's cloudy in the New York, New Jersey area. A little bit overcast. There's a chance of rain. I think this is good news, though, because I don't think this game is going to get canceled, and we don't have to worry about the in-game rain delay if this is going to start late. So,
yeah,
does
it
this
looks
change
like
your outlook on Scherzer at all?
I just jumped back to the radar site that I use, and it looks like it did change a little bit. So now there's a little block of light rain between 7 and 8. So it looks like just a couple of the little dots and little blobs on the radar came a little further south. Remember when I said they were north and west? They dropped down a little bit. So maybe they hit Queens, but it doesn't look like it's going to be anything sustained. So I think it's exactly what you said, a little bit of a delay, and then we pick up some upside on Scherzer.
Yeah, and we've minimized the risk of an in-game delay where Scherzer would potentially have to get pulled after a couple innings. So no real concerns there. I think I still feel pretty good about everything going there. No cause for concern as far as I'm concerned, unless maybe Daniel Vogelbach also traded to the Mets. But let me refresh well, it's not going to be updated yet. I am curious to see if this lowers Scherzer's ownership in the next few minutes. That is a possibility, which would actually make me like Scherzer even more for this spot.
Yeah,
if we find out there's less rain risk and less ownership because of the rain concerns, that would be something that's appealing to me, but we'll have to wait a couple minutes to get that kind of update because it's not going to be immediate. Let's do the home run picks now because the people are really calling from the chat. I know we're kind of jumping the gun, but I have to give the people what they want here, Terry. I have one home run bet for the day, and it's Shohei Ohtani plus 650 to homer. As much as I think that Charlie Morton's in a good spot for DFS purposes this year, he's had some struggles with long balls this year. I'm going to pull up his numbers right now, but off the top of my head, yeah, I have it in front of me. 37.6% ground ball rate for Morton this year. For his career, he's over 50%. So there's a lot more balls getting hit in the air against Morton. Then you've also got, in terms of allowing runs, 4.45 ERA, 4.16 expected ERA. This has been one of the weaker years in terms of preventing runs that we've ever seen from Morton. And then a lot of it's just coming via homers. His last start, he gave up 3 homers. He's averaging about 1 homer allowed per start. This Angels lineup is not good, as a lot of people in chat have mentioned, which I totally agree with. But they've got one hitter in the lineup who unfortunately can't play for DFS because FanDuel and DraftKings, they just don't know how to figure out how to make a generational talent, what makes him so interesting and cool. DraftKings and FanDuel haven't figured out how to make Ohtani both a pitcher and a hitter for DFS purposes, but we can still bet on him as a hitter. So Ohtani plus 650 odds seems pretty long to me. What do you think of him? And then what is your home run pick of the day?
Yeah, plus 650. I like that a lot. It's a guy you could definitely target. I don't actually have him in my model because of how he exists in FanDuel today as a pitcher only, so he's not pulling a home run projection. But based on the power number that is on the screen here, he would have an above average chance at a home run in my home run model. So I like that pick a lot. Going up against Charlie Morton, 3.57% home run percentage on the season, a 40.2% hard hit, 9.7% barrel. So I definitely think that one's easy. Very top of my board is dominated by some Yankees and some Astros here, which is fairly common. There's also a Kyle Schwarber hiding out there, but the very top of the board, kind of a homer pick, obvious Aaron Judge. I can drop down from that and go to either one of the left-handed Astros, which I think are more interesting hitters, more interesting talking point. So Jordan Alvarez or Kyle Tucker, like both of those guys a lot in this spot, both of them well above average home run marks here for me. So I'll be getting to a pretty big share of both of those guys, I think.
Yep, I think that all totally makes sense. I'm happy you brought up the Yankees because that is going to transition right into us talking about stacks. Top stacks tool free to use over at Awesemo.com. So if there's ever a point in time where you guys are considering, should I sign up? Oh, I said Awesemo. Stokastic. I haven't screwed that up in a really long time, but I did
it. I've done it once, and it was in the intro to the show on Saturday. I said it right out of the gate. I said, Awesemo, welcome to the Awesemo. Damn it, right in the middle of the intro.
Yeah, it got me there. But anyway, if you guys want to sign up for a Stokastic membership and you're wondering what is some of the stuff that comes behind the paywall, well, something like the Top Stacks tool, which is free to use today. Really useful way to look at what the ownership is of each individual team, and then also what the projected odds of being the top scoring team are. And one thing you notice when you look at all the projections today is a lot of people are gravitating towards the cheaper offenses because they want to pay up at pitcher so frequently, which makes sense. We talked about how great all the pay up options are at pitcher. The cheaper options are kind of lacking, but as a result, the Yankees are only picking up 5% ownership as a team over on DK, and that seems pretty light to me in a matchup against Tyler Wells. I know the Orioles bullpen better than expected this year, but if the Yankees are able to get into Tyler Wells early, I don't really know that it's going to matter all that much. Ownership slightly higher over on FanDuel, 7%, not all that problematic for me. But I think if we roster the Yankees as a stack and go maybe a little bit cheaper at pitcher, we are really differentiating our lineups because that's just not the kind of builds people are looking to make today. And then there's still guys that are really cheap that are easy to use as one-off, so we don't have to totally punt the pitcher position. But the Yankees, you mentioned them popping up a lot in your home run model. I also think this is a spot where there's a lot of upside. And whenever we're getting the Yankees at modest ownership in a decent spot, I think it makes sense. So the Yankees are my favorite stack of the day for large field tournaments, my favorite stack of the day for single entry tournaments. Where do you stand on New York as a stack?
Yep, they're right at the top of my board. They were the top ranked team in my power index, which is just the raw average of my home run model totals. It was them and the Astros at the top of the board, kind of like I said in the individual picks. So with the field not really getting there, with them being positively leveraged, that's definitely a spot that I want to jump on. A little bit, well, let me reload the page. They're around efficiently owned. Let's call it efficient ownership at worst, maybe slightly negatively leveraged. Yeah, slightly negative on the FanDuel slate, where we're talking about a 7.5% ownership share, not even into double digits. I'm happy to get overweight to the field there. I'm definitely going to be getting to a lot of Astros. The Rays are really interesting to me today. I picked them kind of when I was just messing around hand building when I took the dog to the dog park. I picked them out of the gate, put them in my placeholder lineup. Wasn't expecting them to be the top of the board. Wasn't expecting them to be as popular as they are against Brad Keller. So I think that's another interesting spot that I'm curious to see how they come up for me now when I do like a full sort. But the Yankees are definitely going to be a target. And then it'll just be like, how much do I get to Astros? How much do I get to Rays around the sides?
Yeah. So for me, when it comes to the Rays, it's an excellent spot for them. I think they're about appropriately owned. We have them as fair ownership and top stack odds, both on DK and FanDuel. But I am really trying to reduce my ownership share at offense just because I think the chalk is so unavoidable at pitcher that I think it's easier to differentiate, which is not uncommon for me. I do this all the time, differentiate more so at offense than I do at pitcher. But today, especially because I'm playing a lot of chalk pitchers and the ownership's so concentrated for the pitchers, I prefer the Yankees for lower ownership. So that's the team I land on the most. But Rays, certainly sensible. They're a team that's going to be really popular. Not the most popular team on the slate. That is going to be the Arizona Diamondbacks over on DraftKings, projected for about 12% ownership as a team. Over on FanDuel, they're the second most popular team, projected for just over 9% ownership. Clearly a good spot for them against Patrick Corbin. In terms of salary saving, they are absurdly cheap, especially on DraftKings, which is driving a lot of ownership. Terry, how are you going to handle them against Arizona? Because it's against Arizona against Patrick Corbin. Corbin sucked this year. He's clearly on the decline, doesn't have all that much in the tank. But Arizona doesn't have the best offense in the world, and they're one of the more negatively leveraged teams that we have on the slate. So how are you going to balance a bad offense in a good spot that's also picking up a bunch of ownership at reasonable price tags?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be underweight to the Diamondbacks. It looks like in my just pure version of the sort, before I start influencing anything, they come up as the 6th highest owned team and around the field's number. So once I finish moving some things around, they'll probably be under the field. And I'm happy with that position. Corbin is a pitcher that I've targeted. I targeted him all last year when he was very bad. He's gotten a little bit better this season. 3.63% home run rate this year compared to a 4.93% last year. 4.06%, 4.06 xFIP compared to a 4.29. Strikeout rate around the same, but he's been slightly less targetable for like massive power upside. Last year, it just seemed like he was giving up multiple home runs every time. This year, he's had a few bright spots. It's not, again, not leading me to Corbin unless you really need to spend less than $6,000 on DK only at pitcher, but it's keeping me enough at bay on the Diamondbacks that I'm just not as enthusiastic about them, I think, as the field is. And if the field's going to get that overweight to a team that's just dead even at league average, creating runs, 100 WRC plus against lefties, dead in the middle of the league, 2.82% home run rate, ranks them 15th against lefties, a 149 ISO ranks 17th. They're okay at not striking out, putting the ball in play, but they don't create a ton of runs. They don't generate a ton of power against lefties. So yeah, I'm happy to be below the field's ownership here. And just, if they beat me, they beat me.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. I just very rarely roster an offense that's going to be that popular when they have that low of top stack odds. And we're looking at a team that has right around 4% chance of being the top scoring team, 12% ownership on DK, FanDuel 9%, but even at the slightly lower ownership on FanDuel, I know a lot of people might say, what's the difference between 12% and 9%? Well, if you're building 150 lineups in large field, it actually makes a really big difference, that 3% ownership. But yeah, it's too much ownership for me. I'm going to be looking elsewhere with my bats. And if you're playing contrarian a pitcher, you play whoever the hell you want at offense. If you're playing like Lucas Giolito or Spencer Howard, if you're playing anybody who isn't Ohtani, Morton, Scherzer, Burns at pitcher, you do whatever you want at offense because you already have a different looking lineup. That's not really as much what I'm doing. So therefore, I kind of have to differentiate at offense. Another pitcher matchup that kind of falls in the same boat for me is the Milwaukee Brewers going up against Antonio Senzatella. Senzatella sucks. He's a pitcher that I like to pick on quite a bit, especially when he's at home in Coors Field. But once again, this is going to be a team that's very popular on both FanDuel and DraftKings, the most popular offense over on FanDuel on the entire slate. And Senzatella, for as bad as he is, if we have to pick out one positive, he does induce a lot of ground balls, which leads to him being a pitcher that doesn't frequently hang up these, crazy high run total games against him. And if it does happen, they're more apt to happen at Coors Field than it would on the road. So Senzatella, absolutely no good as a pitcher. His numbers are terrible this year. 4.95 ERA, 5.92 expected ERA. But I'm looking to go elsewhere with my offense, especially when you consider that Senzatella's only had one start this year where he's given up more than 5 runs. He has a lot of starts where it's like, hey, 5 innings, 3 runs, 6 innings, 3 runs, but there aren't really that many blow up starts in there for him. He's just kind of consistently shitty, but not like completely awful. So I'm going to also just cross my fingers and hope like, all right, I'm going to take my chances with other offenses. I'm hoping that the chalk Diamondbacks and the chalk Brewers don't kill me. Are you viewing the Brewers kind of similar to how you're viewing the Diamondbacks?
A little bit. Yeah. I'm getting to probably less of them than the field is here. And I'm just jumping over to the matchup to look at the individual hitters. So like, I don't mind getting 2 shares of Andrew McCutchen at 5% ownership on FanDuel, 2% on DK for cheap, hitting cleanup in the middle of that lineup. Hunter Renfroe is in the just above 10 range on FanDuel, just below on DK. The back end of that lineup with like Colton Wong, Luis Urias, I can maybe grab some Urias there. But the top end is just really highly owned. Rowdy Tellez has come back to earth a lot since his hot start to the season. So you're really dealing with like a Christian Yelich, Willy Adames at a ton of ownership. I don't love that about it. I do like the matchup, but like you said, Senzatella is a serviceable real life pitcher. There's they were talking about it on the last show. There's a reason the Rockies gave him $10 million a year over the next 5 years at the end of last season. He keeps it in the yard. He keeps it to, he suppresses opposing offenses enough. 7.8 degree average launch angle, 5.3% barrel rate, a 1.81% home run rate. So it's difficult to generate a DFS winning score against this guy. I think the public's a little bit too excited about it.
Yeah, that's where I see it as well. A lot of it's a price point play too, where I think the Brewers are a little bit underpriced. I think there's more of a floor than a ceiling for their offense. I very highly doubt that Senzatella shuts them down, but I also don't think this is going to be an 8-9 run game or anything like that. Also, to clear up any kind of confusion in the chat here, Corbin Burns, good. Patrick Corbin, bad. I know they're both Corbin, and going back and forth between the two gets a little confusing at times. It's definitely live that Terry or I have said Patrick Burns or there's a chance one of us had a slip of the tongue at some point, but Patrick Corbin pitching for the Nationals, bad, confirmed bad.
Quite
Corbin
bad.
Burns pitching for the Brewers,
quite bad.
Yeah. Corbin Burns pitching for the Brewers, former, reigning Cy Young winner, potential Cy Young winner this year as well. Very, very good.
Winner
Arguably
of massive season-long Cy Young bets for certain people on this show from last season.
Yeah. It's a mistake if you're building lineups and you get them confused. It's an issue if you click the wrong name. You're gonna get results that you don't want. But Patrick Corbin, bad. Corbin Burns, good. Hope that clears that all up. We've got a super chat here, a couple of super chats. One from Corey Randall. Thoughts on a Seattle stack? They've been hitting Urquidy. I'm not massively high on Jose Urquidy as a pitcher. He just doesn't generate very many strikeouts. He's had a couple of weird outlier starts where he has generated them this year. It's literally been 2 though. As for the Seattle Mariners, they were the hottest team in baseball heading into the All-Star break. They're not picking up that much ownership today, right around 1% over on DK, on FanDuel, projected for 2% ownership. It's not my favorite offense on the slate, but they're in my mix, and it's a team I'm overweight to, so I don't have an issue with them at all. This Seattle team, especially because Julio Rodriguez appears by all accounts that he's the real deal, right? There's a lot of variance, high boom or bust rate when it comes to these high-end prospects. It looks like we could start putting Jose Rodriguez or Julio Rodriguez, my bad, in the same tier as young hitters. Like for me, at least Juan Soto, Ronald Acuna going forward. Maybe it's too soon to say something like that, but I mean, I think he's a future superstar. So the Mariners, I think this is a good enough spot against Urquidy, and at their ownership, I think is a team worth being overweight to. Do you have any Mariners takes?
Yeah, I think I will be there. I don't have my sort lineup percentages in front of me, but just based on how low they're owned on the FanDuel slate and how they're projecting out for me in this matchup against Urquidy, yeah, I think that's a good spot. totally agree on Julio Rodriguez. It's maybe difficult to put him in like that Juan Soto hitter caliber just based on the strikeout rate, but he's a different kind of hitter, right? And he's going to get you those stolen bases like Acuna does. He's going to get you a ton of power. The kid gets on base at a decent clip, hits for a lot of power, drives the ball really well, 50.2% hard hit, 14.3% barrel on the season, 16 homers, 21 steals off the top of the lineup there. So match him up with some Ty France, some Jesse Winker, Carlos Santana, Eugenio Suarez. Kyle Lewis is back in this lineup now, and he costs the dead minimum on the FanDuel slate. He's projecting out nicely for me in terms of the home run upside, 2,900, no ownership at all. Don't sleep on Kyle Lewis if you're building Mariners stacks. Also a premium prospect. He's just had at this point, 14 devastating knee injuries in his career, and it's really set him back. But yeah, top to bottom, I can roster that Mariners team.
By the way, to make the Patrick Corbin / Corbin Burns thing even more weird and confusing, Patrick Corbin makes considerably more money than Corbin Burns also, which doesn't seem right in the grand scheme of things. But that is
they're
how
trying
these
to pawn him off
sometimes.
with whoever they give Juan Soto to, which I think is a reasonable tax to pay.
But so the Juan Soto thing, and I know we're getting kind of close to lock, so I don't want to belabor the point too much about wrapping this up. But people are outraged that he turned down a $440 million contract. It wasn't a fair offer to Juan Soto.
No, not at all.
They offered him a 15-year. So a couple of reasons why I think he turned down. Number one, I think a 15-year, $440 million contract where the average annual value is under $30 million per year is not enough to pay Juan Soto. I know it's a shit ton of money, but it's just the reality of what the market is. I think you'd get to a point 10 years from now, you'd be like, I was Juan Soto making less than $30 million. Point two,
he'd
also
be $20 million underpaid 10 years from now.
Yeah. And then something else that also about this is he's locking his entire career up with a Washington Nationals team that hasn't really shown much intention to win in recent years, which I think is another thing that's probably a sticking point for him. So people are all up in arms about it. And to me, it's like, I totally understand why it is that he didn't accept that contract offer.
Absolutely. And honestly, I mean, he's not doing them necessarily a disservice by making it happen now, because they're going to be able to cash in a massive trade chip with him and get multiple top prospects here, some major league capable players right now. Like, he is the most valuable trade chip to hit the market in years, in my opinion.
Yeah. And we'll see what happens. They could just hold on to him and try to trade him next year or something else, but definitely an interesting one. If he gets traded, that would obviously be a total game changer for whoever gets him.
I will be more excited if the Yankees get Juan Soto than I will if the Knicks get Donovan Mitchell. And that's saying something.
And it's not going to happen that the Yankees go out and get Juan Soto because Steinbrenner is cheap. He's not his dad. And they would have to pay Soto.
No, yeah, and he's not his brother either, unfortunately. I could see them going out and making the trade happen, but then I don't think they sign Soto and Judge going forward. I think they would say, all right, we let Judge go. We've got Soto now. Like, I think that's how they would play it. But I could see them making the deal.
Yeah, maybe, and they just let him walk in free agency. But we got a couple more super chats here we'll answer. We'll talk about some contrarian stacks, and then we'll hit the road. So once again, do us a favor, guys. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to Home Run Derby. Not the Home Run Derby in general, though I do enjoy the Home Run Derby. But Home Run Derby in the YouTube chat left a super chat just saying thanks. Thank you very much. We appreciate you watching the show. I don't remember seeing you in chat. So if you're here for the first time, thank you for watching. Hope you stick around. Come more often. Super chat from Tristan Allman. How is a Chicago White Sox stack? Well, for one, they're not healthy again, which this team never stays healthy. I don't know what Jerry Reinsdorf, who owns both them and the Bulls, is known as a very, very cheap owner. Yep. Is he just cheaping out on the training staff here? Because nobody could stay healthy. Apparently there's no concussion for Luis Robert, but he's got like weird vertigo and dizzy symptoms. So all of that's concerning. I don't know what it is that's going on there, but as for them today, it's a decent enough matchup against Cal Quantrill. We do have them as being positively leveraged on the FanDuel site with 4% ownership, 5% top stack odds. So minimal positive leverage there. Same thing for DK as well. So I think it's a team worth getting to, but also not necessarily my favorite stack. They're kind of in the same boat as the Mariners we got before, but I have no issue with them. I think the ownership is maybe a little bit low, if anything. So are the White Sox a team you're getting to, Terry?
A little bit. It's tempered, getting some one-offs around like Timmy Anderson in there, Jose Abreu definitely, Eloy Jimenez definitely. They do get Just Money Grandal back in the middle of this lineup, so it's like a one-in, one-out situation with these guys in recent weeks. They can't just get fully healthy, and I agree. It's probably Reinsdorf is paying the kind of trainers who come in and just shit on your floor instead of helping these guys. So it's probably something like that. But yeah, I'm getting to some, but not a massive share of full stacks of these guys. A little bit more on some free mans, a little bit more on some one-offs, I think.
We've got a start time for the Mets Padres game, 7:40 p.m. So, you wait 30 minutes. You're going to get your fantasy points from Max Scherzer. So no concerns there. We were talking about that before. Everything seems well and good with the weather. Go play Max Scherzer with no real issues there. Does not appear we have any more super chats. We're all caught up on that. So here's where I want to finish with Terry. What's your favorite contrarian stack of the slate? If you're going to look at a team, and lots of teams, nearly every team in action today, so there's plenty of spots to go to for low ownership. If you're going to take a shot on one of these teams that's 2% owned or less, what's your choice over on FanDuel? And then I'll do it for DK.
Let's take a look over on the FanDuel board. That's 2% owned or less, we're saying?
Yeah, 2% owned or less.
I don't like. I was gonna say the Nationals are the top ranked one, but I don't really love that because I'm getting to some Zach Gallen in there. 2% is a little bit of a tough barrier. Can I have 2.6% and say the Cubs against Kyle Gibson?
I'll allow it.
I'll take that one. I do think there's a little bit of power in that Cubs lineup. We kind of touched on it when we were talking about that Wilson Contreras upside. I think there's enough power in their lineup. I think there's enough power available in Kyle Gibson that they're a little bit frisky for basically no ownership, and they're cheap. They're an alternate value stack. If you're not going to Diamondbacks, if you're not going to Marlins, you can go to Cubs.
I'm going to go with the Texas Rangers at 1% ownership against Cole Irvin. Irvin is a 3.21 ERA, but he's a 4.7 expected ERA. And there's some stuff when you look at Cole Irvin's numbers that just screams regression to me. The two things that are the most obvious things to look at and expect regression from going forward: BABIP and left on base rate. 258 BABIP for Cole Irvin. That's not going to hold up. And then also a 77.5% strand rate. These are two numbers that are for sure going to regress. If you look at his projections, both for Zips and Steamer going forward, and then also just his career numbers. By all, this is a guy who should be around the 70% strand rate and should be around a 300 BABIP, right at league averages, also what his career average has been. So these numbers are so out of whack to me. I think he's going to be considerably worse in the second half of the season. A couple other things too. His velocity is at the lowest it's ever been at any other point in his career this year. That's a little bit concerning. His ground ball rate fairly low at 38.1%. So I'm not a big believer in Cole Irvin, who's also not striking guys out this year. 16.1% strikeout rate. That's problematic when it comes to a pitcher. The Texas Rangers, they made big splashes in the offseason signing Corey Seager and Marcus Semien. To this point, they haven't gotten the results they've desired, but Semien has gradually gotten better as the season's gone on. So 1% ownership, if I'm looking to really get contrarian, the Texas Rangers for me. How does that sound to you?
I think that's a great call. You make a great case there. And Cole Irvin, you can see it. You can see the decline in the velocity in the hard hit. The response on the hard hit numbers, 42.1% hard hit is up 2 or 3 points over last year, 10.3% barrel up a couple points over last year. Hasn't translated into home runs. It's floating at 2.86% versus 2.99 from last year. But I expect that he will definitely have some negative base regression there. And to add on to that, Texas active roster against left-handed pitching this year, only first in baseball with a 221 ISO, second in baseball creating runs at 129 WRC plus, second in baseball with a 4.87% home run rate. So that Rangers offense against lefties has actually been there pretty firmly. So I like that. That's a good call. I might actually give them a little bit of a nudge.
All right. So an update on pitcher ownership. Nothing's really changed with the Scherzer situation. I thought there was going to be a chance. The only thing we've seen, Ohtani's actually come down a little bit in ownership since we started the show. Not anything significant, but we're looking at like 33% on ZK to 30%. Then on FanDuel, 9.5% to 8.5%. So does that mean anything in the grand scheme of things? No, not really, but I stand by. I think Ohtani, at least for DraftKings purposes, is a pretty good pivot off of Charlie Morton for single entry. Other than that, Terry, anything that you want to talk about when it comes to this slate that we have not yet hit on over the course of the show?
I do think that Ohtani spot is a little interesting, like we talked about, just based on the salary on DK coming down to the 9,000. And if he's shedding a little bit of ownership, it's down to 30% now. Max also looks like he shed like 1 or 2 points of ownership on the Rain, but not enough. So nothing really from that top end. I touched on Tyler Anderson when we were just like throwing out a bunch of pitchers that are in that mix of guys that I'm, kind of getting to and kind of intrigued by it at like zero ownership. And I mean, it's not like a standout pitcher, 21% strikeout rate on the year, 3.94 xFIP. He's good at limiting power, only a 30.7% hard hit, 2.33% home run rate. He's popping a little bit more than I would expect, I think, in this matchup. The Giants, you need to avoid their run creation, their power. Very good. 205 ISO is fourth, 121 WRC plus is fifth, a 4.45 home run rate is third, but they do strike out 26th in the league, 24.4% strikeout rate against lefties. So that's kind of what I'm hanging it on with the Tyler Anderson call, but he's only 1 and change percent owned and he's fairly priced. So I think I'm gaining enough ground on the field where my, small investment in Tyler Anderson shares above the field could yield something.
Yep, I think that all makes sense to me. And I mean, we're right at the end of our showtime here at 7:00. So that is going to do it for us, guys. Thank you very much for watching.
Yep.
Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, have a great weekend. I think that we should wish a good weekend to everybody. Also, survive the heat. Drink your water, right? We don't want nobody get dehydrated. Drink it's 1,000,000 degrees everywhere. Drink some water this weekend.
Don't leave your pets or children in your cars when you go grocery shopping. And
yeah, unless you don't like them. If your kid's being really annoying, leave them in the car. Yeah, and buckle them up super tight in that, and put a couple extra clothes on them. If you got a baby,
child locks.
Yeah, if you got a baby that isn't sleeping well, is being really annoying, you're gonna go to the grocery store this weekend. You're putting them in a sweatshirt and you're leaving them locked in the car. Other than that,
wrap it in a garbage bag, leave it in the car.
Yeah,
give it a good shake and throw it in the back seat.
Put a bag over its head also while you're at it. I'm not responsible for anything I say on the show. Everything is solely for entertainment purposes, and do not reflect the ideas or the overall morals of the company I work for.
You people
have a
don't
good weekend,
come here for
guys.
life advice.
Yeah, enjoy yourself.